Welcome to the May 20th meeting of the Cambridge Board of Zoning Appeals. My name is Gus Alexander, and I am the chair. This meeting is being held remotely due to statewide emergency orders limiting the size of public gatherings in response to COVID-19, and in accordance with Governor Charles D. Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, temporarily amending certain requirements of the open meeting law, as well as the City of Cambridge temporary emergency restrictions on city public meetings, city events, and city permitted events due to COVID-19, dated May 27, 2020. This meeting is being video and audio recorded and is broadcast on cable television channel 22 within Cambridge. In due course, there will be a transcript of this meeting. All board members, applicants, and members of the public will state their names before speaking. All votes will be taken by roll call. Members of the public will be kept on mute until it is time for public comment. I will give instructions for public comment at that time, and you can also find instructions on the city's webpage for remote EZA meetings. The rule for tonight, given the fact that there's going to be, I assume, based on past experience, many people who wish to speak, you will have only 2 minutes to speak. We will try to give you a signal at the end of a minute and a half or so that you're nearing the end of your allotted time. But when the 2 minutes have run, we're going to cut off the mics and move on to the next speaker. I will start by asking the staff to take board member attendance and verify that all members are audible. Brendan?
Brendan Sullivan, present and audible.
Jim?
Jim Monteverdi, present.
Andrea?
Andrea Hickey, present.
Laura?
Laura Wernick, present.
Good. Okay, tonight we have only one case. It is a continued case. It is case number 017326, 2072 Massachusetts Avenue. I will start the meeting. Anyone, is the applicant here and wish to be heard?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Thank
Okay.
you.
Mr. Hope, before you start your comments, I want to speak about something. Yesterday morning, I received at my home a hand-delivered letter from law firm purporting to represent some of the persons who are opposed to the relief that you are seeking tonight. Have you received that letter?
I believe so. Was it from Attorney McGregor?
Let me see.
Yeah.
Yes, McGregor and Logier, yes.
Yes.
Okay, I want to be sure that you had seen that letter. Fine. I will go on to point out, one of the points made in the letter, the only really new point, was the vote required to grant relief. The letter points out or asserts that given the fact that Cambridge has more than 10% of its housing stock affordable, that we have the right to just apply our local zoning bylaws or other local laws and not be bound by the more restrictive view set forth in Chapter 48. I have referred this letter and this opinion to the city solicitor's office, and about an hour or two ago, I received a response. And I want to put that response on the record. The response is much more nuanced than what has been suggested by counsel that I earlier referred to. Generally, we need to determine, so the opinion of the city councilor says, whether the regional need for low and moderate income housing outweighs local concerns with the application. Again, so my gloss, essentially there is a bias, if you will, or tilting toward granting relief for affordable housing. But if the amount of affordable housing in the community is more than 10% of the housing stock of the community, the rules change. And Cambridge is one of the very few communities in Massachusetts where the amount of affordable housing available in Cambridge exceeds 10%. In fact, it's about 4.8%. Under those circumstances, City Solicitor's Office cited a case, Boothroyd versus Zoning Board of Appeals of Amherst, and quoted from that case. And I'm going to repeat that quote for the record, because this is the rules for tonight. Once a municipality meets its minimum affordable housing obligation, and that's the 10% that I referred to, and Cambridge has met this obligation. The opinion from the City Solicitor's Office continues, the local board of appeals may exercise its discretion to apply its local zoning laws, and the board is not required to grant a comprehensive permit. But it does go on to say, application of the regional needs test, however, ensures that local boards of appeal will balance the considerations involved. So that's the rules of the game for purposes of the vote that presumably will be taken before the evening is over. With that, I'll turn the chair back to you, the microphone back to you, Sean, and you can make your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Sean Hope. I'm a principal of Hope Real Estate. I'm here tonight along with my business partner and co-developer, Jason Korb of Capstone Communities. Together, we are the applicant known as CCHRE 2072 Mass Ave Tenant LLC. And we are here requesting approval of a comprehensive permit to construct 48 apartment units with 3 accessible parking spaces, 2 drop-off spaces, and 1 bicycle parking spaces. Prior to getting into the application, I would like to just discuss the speakers tonight. We would have Jason Korb. We're going to also have project architect Jason Forney. We have our land use counsel, Ruth Silman, a partner Nixon Peabody, and we also have our traffic engineer, Scott Thornton. And Mr. Chair, thank you for laying out the ground rules for this evening. I would just want to refresh the board that this 14% or 10% has been in place for many years. So the last several comprehensive permits you have heard and approved should have had the same test, because Cambridge has been over its 10% for some time now. But I do think this clarification is important, and we believe that the application of the needs test is appropriate. I would like to just, before we get into the drawings, I'd like to take a minute to refresh the board's recollection about the December 10th hearing. That was a multi-hour hearing. There was lots of feedback, both for and against. And also there was several surplus of board comments. From my recollection, the board's comments evolved throughout the hearing after our presentation and the different comments, both for and against. So I think this is relevant because in preparation for this hearing, and really after December 10th, we reviewed our notes. We also reviewed the transcript to really figure out what were the highlights that the board wanted us to review. And we really used that as our roadmap to do the work necessary to become back before today. And just briefly, at the first hearing, we stated for the requirements to be in front of the board. And I think those are important because we established those, and I would just want to repeat those for the record and incorporate those into any decision tonight. So the first is that there are 3 requirements. The first is that the project is eligible for tax credits by a subsidizing agency. The second requirement is the tenant is a limited dividend organization, which CCHRE is. And lastly, that we have submitted the requisite site control in the form of a lease to show that we have control over the site. So I just wanted to incorporate those for the record. And so the next, to the actual, as I talked about, there were a couple of takeaways that I wanted to establish for the board that were our guiding principles in terms of the review and the work product that we came up with. So the first one was, and this is the takeaway, that the board acknowledged that there was a need for affordable housing, that this need was a strong need. It was a need in Cambridge and throughout the region. And also that the 40B legislation was intended to promote the preservation and production of affordable housing by way of of waiving certain local bylaws that are consistent with local needs. The second takeaway that we heard and we took to heart was that the board was concerned about the scale and the height of our proposed building. Both the Mass Ave was the primary focus, and we worked with the urban design staff internally, also with CDD, to try to come in to be able to mitigate that. And during the drawings presentation, we want to talk through our process and how we arrived. Also that the board requested that we continue to post plans on our website and that we stay engaged with the community for the purpose of making sure that any feedback that was appropriate or would improve their project was incorporated into what we presented to the board. And lastly, the board asked us to review alternatives for the site and specifically asked us to review an overlay project on the site. And we're prepared to talk about that as well. So at the December 10th hearing, as I said, there was robust dialogue, both for and against. And after that hearing, we took our charge to go and to look at our proposal. We had a continued case on January 7th, as the board is aware. And prior to that case, as the board knows, we determined that there was an error drawings of the Russell Apartments. Once we noticed that error, we quickly requested a continuance, and we sought to go remedy those incorrect drawings. But at the continuance, the board in its wisdom, and specifically the chair, asked us to go back to the planning board. And we did that prior to today. And I think that's important because the planning board, as the board is aware, is really the design arm of the city. Oftentimes when the city council is looking at zoning changes, when they're coming up with design criteria, they often go to the planning board for review and or recommendations. As the board is aware, also under Chapter 48, the planning board is the agency of the city that oftentimes has to have give their recommendation prior to an ordinance change or city council action. So I would say the planning board is not just a design board, but they also are required under state law to opine on certain zoning changes, and I think specifically relevant to this case. And so that was one of the things that we had the board want us to accomplish. I'd also just like to highlight for the board the processes for these type of comprehensive permits prior to becoming before the board. So really for the last year, we have been working with urban design staff of CDD. So when we talk about the size and the scale of the building, both in terms of just height and density, FAR, these were all vetted very early on by the city's urban design staff. Also, the Affordable Housing Trust at the outset has to look at a schematic, just a general massing of the building, maybe not specific floors, but to be able to know that the project is financeable and feasible. So as we came out and we went through the public processes, I want the board to know that we were really guided by advice from the professionals of the city. This was not a Jason and Sean, what do we think would work on this site alone. We received feedback and we were guided by those principles. And I think that that's evidenced in the letters from the various departments, which we'll touch on later on. But between January 7th and today, here's some of the work we did. We continue to work with the city's urban design staff to fine tune the proposal and find ways to mitigate the mass. We held community meetings. We had a community meeting on March 30th, where the plans that you see today were fully reviewed. They were posted on our website, on March 12th. And on March 30th, we had a full Zoom meeting where members of the public could ask questions and really review the proposal. We had our architect do a full review. We also dropped off plans to the Russell Apartments. As the board probably heard through numerous letters in the file, many of the Russell Apartment residents are seniors and could not have access to the Zoom meeting. So we dropped off boards as well as an extra step to really make sure that people understood the proposal and were able to comment on it as well. And lastly, before we get to the drawings presentation, I feel like at the first hearing, there was so much dialogue that actual letters from the departments were slightly glanced over, and we didn't really have a chance to dissect and hear what the professionals of the city had to say about this proposal, which I think is very important. So one, for the planning board had two opportunities to review this proposal. They reviewed the 9-6 proposal, and they also reviewed the 9-5 proposal with the corrected Russell Apartments. So that letter is in the file. But both times the planning board approved the design, because that was their charge, approved it unanimously. And just a quick excerpt from the letter that is in your file. The board, and I'm just going to quickly, the board members noted that the height in the proposed building is greater than the buildings immediately surrounding the buildings, but also noted that there are examples of the buildings of this height elsewhere on Mass Ave. Also, that the additional density is not a concern in this location, and that the acute need for affordable housing justifies an exceptional approach. So that was the recommendation from the planning board to the zoning board after the second hearing. I also just want to let you know that it was the planning board chair also decided not to open public comment. And one of the points he made was that they had received thousands of letters, both for and against the proposal. Now, thousands may have been exaggerating, but the point is the same comments, the same feedback that the board has heard in the file, the planning board heard. So I would say that there wasn't a lack of discussion, there wasn't a lack of opportunity for public comment, and I believe that their recommendation stands on its own. I would just want to briefly also turn to the traffic and parking letter, because I think that is a lot of the correspondence that we've also heard about the impact or lack thereof on the traffic. So in the first bullet point in the recommendation from the traffic and parking department says, traffic and parking strongly supports this project, particularly the plan to accommodate 3 10-foot travel lanes. It goes on to further say that this will make the Mass Ave Walden Street intersection more functional for traffic moving throughout the intersection. So in summary, when we have submitted this application to the professionals of the city, they have opined that when built, the project will solve a decades-long traffic and congestion issue at the corner of Walden and Mass Ave. The project's impacts for parking and traffic will be minimal, especially in light of the previous use fast food, which generates more vehicle trips and utilizes a dangerous curb cut on Mass Ave. And lastly, and I'm interjecting this, but that the planning board said that the height has context because that there are other buildings in the surrounding area and that the density is not an issue in light of the need for affordable housing. So that's a summation of the recommendations from the professional city. And that is consistent with what we heard for the last year, going back to them, getting feedback, trying to fine tune the proposal. So I'd now like to turn it over to Tony to walk through the presentation.
Thank you, Sean. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. First of all, can everyone see the screen?
Yes, I can. Well, I
Thank
did.
you.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. My name is Jason Forney. I'm a principal with Bruner Cott Architects, and I'm joined tonight by my colleague, Greg Russell. We're returning this evening to discuss the proposed design for 2072. My presentation tonight is organized in a way that I'll first share with you the changes that we've made since December, and then I'll present the overall design to you, focusing on what we think are the most relevant issues. Next, please. Since December, we've made several changes. First, as Sean mentioned, corrected an inaccuracy in the renderings related to the height of the Russell apartment buildings, which abuts our site to the east. Second, we've made a series of design changes. In response to the issues that have come about in discussions with community members and with the city's urban design and planning staff, we've lowered a portion of the building closest to the residential neighborhood from 6 stories to 5 stories. We have removed a column of windows facing the Russell apartments. We're including a less intensive roof terrace at the top of the 5th floor. All of these moves were made in response to comments we heard from people who live close by, seeking less height and intensity as we transition away from Mass Avenue. As a result, we've shuffled the unit mix a bit to maintain 48 units. In addition, we've lowered the parapet on the 9-story portion in consultation with urban design staff. So that's a summary of the changes. Now I'll walk through them. After a community meeting in January, participants suggested to us that the Russell apartment building was looked taller in the renderings than it actually is. We immediately checked it and discovered that they were correct. And so going forward, all of the materials have been corrected. But because we think accuracy is important, I wanted to walk through a comparative view quickly for you. On the left is the previous rendering showing the building at 70 feet instead of its actual 59. And on the right, the corrected version. Looking up the avenue, a similar comparison. One thing I'd like to note here are the 2 additional opening west facade facing you. I say openings because this is a firewall, and these have always been not operable windows, but decorative elements to articulate facade. Looking south towards Porter Square. And the Russell apartment building was also shown in elevations that we submitted. That has also been corrected. And finally, because our model was used to generate the shadow studies, we've also did all of them. And here's a before and after comparison. A very slight difference, but our team is acknowledging the importance of being as accurate as possible. So perhaps the largest design and development change that we have made is to lower the south portion of the building from 6 stories down to 5 stories. And hearing from abutters, residents of Walden Street, and community development staff, it was clear to us that many people were more concerned about the impact of the building, those who live here every day, as opposed to those passing by on the avenue. While not all people think 9 stories is appropriate on the avenue, we do, and our thinking is reinforced by the ongoing consultation with the urban design staff, review by the planning board, and the alignment with the collective vision outlined in the Envision Cambridge documents. This view gives you a good sense of that change. In addition, you also notice the reduction in intensity of the roof terrace and the leveling. This view shows what that drop looks like from 6 to 5 stories from behind the Russell apartment buildings. The 5-story portion of our building is about 60 feet, which matches the existing building in height. So on the left is the previous and on the right is the proposed, dropping a story. So by comparing these two drawings, you also see that we removed a row of windows that were in the kitchens of the apartments to increase the level of privacy. And again, you can see the less active roof terrace. And looking at the math comparative unit matrix, you'll see that we reduced the total number from 48 to 49, but we also, we removed more than just 1 unit of area from the building and therefore shuffled the units around, losing 2s and 3s in favors of 1s, which decreased the percentage of family-sized units from 71 to 67. In addition to those adjustments, we've changed the parapet on the 9-story portion of the building from 42 inches to 24 inches. On the right is the proposed with the adjusted height. We acknowledge that this is a slight change. Its intent is to lessen the apparent height of the building, but mostly to improve the proportions of the light-colored architectural element while still concealing the building's mechanical equipment, elevator overrun, and stair enclosure. Here's the same comparison from further afield. So at this move in and switch over and present the proposed design that's reflected in the comprehensive permit application in your possession. This continues to be, this is a summary, which I will not read, of the development. I'll give you a second to look at this. Okay, so next. This project and this design continues to be about the transformation of an underutilized corner site currently occupied by surface parking and a 1-story restaurant from a different era, and replacing it with a contextually modern building that responds to the corner site, strives to align with the ambitious goals set by the City of Cambridge with respect to smart growth, transit-oriented development, climate resiliency, and affordable housing production. It abuts the Russell apartment building operated by the Cambridge Housing Authority, a building that has a story blank wall just a few feet from the property line, with all of the units facing the avenue or the neighborhood behind. So our idea here, our design concept starts with the context. And this site is a very well-developed stretch of Massachusetts Avenue, which is Cambridge's main street and a major corridor. Density simply belongs here near the transit in one of our country's major metropolitan areas. The site is 500 yards, 4.5 blocks, and a 5-minute walk from the MBTA Red Line and the Fitchburg commuter rail, which is 1 stop to North Station. A covered bus station at the front door, bus stop at the front door. Quite simply, this is a place where more people should live to leverage the transit system and take cars off the roads. While not the norm, 2072 would not be the only tall building on Massachusetts Avenue. Between Harvard Square and Arlington, there are 2 8-story buildings and 1 other 9-story building. All of these notions respond to the multiple goals and strategies that were laid out in Envision Cambridge, the city's multi-million-dollar collective visioning exercise. A major concept for urban form in Envision Cambridge was to focus them on major commercial corridors, shown on this diagram in orange, passing right by our site, filling gaps in the street wall and increasing density near transit. The list at the bottom of this slide outlines a collection of strategies from Envision Cambridge that have driven our design. In addition to the concepts of smart growth and affordable housing production, our design also moves towards net zero and encourages ground floor activity. I'd like to spend a brief moment on the evolution of design. First of all, as Sean mentioned, we've been working with community development and urban design staff for quite some time, especially urban design, make sure that the building is responding to the city's urban design goals. It was our collective feeling, for the reasons mentioned above, that this site could support more than 6 stories. We began with a building that was 8 stories front to back. Over the months of process, we heard from community members and residents of Walden Street that lowering the building to the south would lessen its impact. So we first began by lowering it to 6 stories and raising the front up to 9. After our December hearing, we examined a number of options that included an 8-story building with a 6-story building in the back. But the 8-story building was sort of pushed more back towards the site to maintain the unit count. And we continue to hear from many residents that 6 stories was too tall in the back. And so to decrease the impact on the Russell apartments and other surrounding dwellings, we're coming back to you this evening with a design that steps down to 5 stories, but maintains 9 on the avenue. I'll restate our collective feeling, which is supported by planning staff and the planning board, that 9 stories is appropriate for this major corridor. And from left to right, you can see this evolution. Far left is where we began, and far right is what is before you this evening. So I'd like to move into design at the site scale. The design has the following relationships with the property, surrounding property lines. On Massachusetts Avenue, the building aligns with the street wall. The ground floor is set back about 3 feet to create a 14-foot sidewalk. To the east, it's on the property line as it joins the brick wall at the Russell Apartments. But the upper stories step back 5 feet from the property line as we move. To the south, the building is on the property line as it adjoins the city-owned parking lot, and then steps back 5 feet to 5 stories and another 25 feet to the 9-story portions, such that the 9-story segment is about 30 feet from the property line and 75 feet from the closest single home at 14 Walden. In this way, the city lot is a very effective buffer. Along Walden Street, the upper stories of the building are at the property. The ground floor is set back 4 feet to make a 7-foot sidewalk. And as we move towards the residential neighborhood, the building has an angled transitional setback that reflects the spirit of the city's zoning. You'll have read, I'm sure, in some of the correspondence, could you go back one, Greg, about the Russell Apartments outdoor space, and I just wanted to locate that for you. It's where the mouse is waving on the west side of the site to our property line, next to the tree that our arborist believes can be saved. So here's the building looking at the corner from the east. And if we talk about design for a moment, we have put a lot of thought into this quality contextual design, just like we did down this street at the London Center and Frost Terrace Affordable Housing. Both projects were opposed heavily, but have contributed to the positive change in Porter Square. The off-white rectangular element here anchors the corner and lifts up, if you could go back one, lifts up to provide transparency on the street. And the facade is inspired by the large rectangular openings of the Henderson Carriage House. And you can see the significant step down towards the neighborhood that acknowledges that transition. Sean read some of the comments from the design staff, but I'd like to echo a few more. They write in their letter to you that they support the high quality architecture. The project's overall massing and facade strategy is appropriate and elegantly designed. Looking up the avenue, you get an idea of the relationship that the building has with its context, becoming a part of the urban streetscape in Porter Square. Here, Mass Ave is 6 lanes and 70 feet wide, with plenty of light and air to support a 9-story building of this density. And this continues from further away as we see an even greater of building heights. Looking from Walden Street towards Mass Avenue, you see the transitional spirit of our design, starting with a 1-story plinth, stepping up to 5, and then on to 9 as we move towards the avenue. You can also see how the building steps back 5 feet in plan as we move towards the neighborhood. The windows here are smaller and the materials, painted, clapboard, and shakes have a finer scale. In a quick study of the massing and fenestration behind the Russell Apartments, you get a sense of the relationship between these two buildings. After stepping down another story, the rear portion of our building is 59 or 60 feet, making it the same height as the Russell Apartments. Most of the 9-story volume faces the Russell's party wall, and 100% of the windows on the south facade here of Russell Apartments maintain their access to light, air, and view. Reflecting the design goal of encouraging activity on the ground floor, we have a mostly transparent facade flanked by an articulated brick base. The second floor slab is 15 feet above the ground floor, making for good retail space. Coming around the corner and looking at a rendered elevation of Walden Street, more transparency and the vehicle entrance tucked in the back of the lot next to the city parking lot. The facade materials include seamed zinc panels, projecting windows, and wood-toned panels to bring warmth and articulation to the facades. We spoke at our first hearing about the improvements to Walden Street, and I won't talk much about this unless you have any questions later. Those changes are shown here at the ground floor, where you can see that by widening the street and narrowing the sidewalk, we get 3 full travel lanes. We've worked carefully with the city engineers to design the entry and exit the parking garage such that drivers can see 20 feet down the sidewalk in either directions, making for a more safe condition. The 2nd through 5th floors are identical with a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments. And here you can see the 5-foot setbacks to the south and east side, as well as the tapered one on the west. At the 6th floor, you see the roof terrace we've made smaller and less intense, both to lower the cost associated with a deeper planted roof and to lessen the impact and noise on those living in the neighborhood. It has a small and an extensive green roof. And then at the roof level, there's a small mechanical room, elevator overrun, mechanical equipment, and a solar array. All of the equipment shown here is modeled and included in all of the rendered views. We have not wavered in our sustainability goals and commitment to carbon and greenhouse gas reductions. Most notably, the building will be designed and certified to meet Passive House Energy Standard. So I will end my portion of the presentation tonight by reviewing the shadow studies with you. In summary, the shadows cast by this development will layer with the existing shadows in the neighborhood. The majority of them are cast out onto Massachusetts Avenue, with very few of them casting towards the residential neighborhood, only in the early morning and late afternoon. So our methodology here is to show shadows on the solstices and equinox at 9 a.m., noon, 3 p.m., and 6 p.m. The existing shadows are gray and the shadows are purple. From the top left at 9 a.m., the shadows are cast up the avenue, at noon across the avenue, 3:30, 3 o'clock, and 3:30 also out onto the avenue. And sadly, on the winter solstice, the sun sets at 4:12 p.m. In the summer, the shadows follow a similar pattern. They're just shorter because the sun is higher in the sky. It takes longer to complete its path. So at 3 p.m., you'll notice the shadow on the Russell Apartments outdoor space that I located earlier for you. We've studied that more closely. There are 15 hours available sun on the summer solstice between 5:07 a.m. and 8:22 p.m. And our building at 2072 creates a partial shadow on that area for about 5 hours out of that 15 in the afternoon, leaving it unaffected for 10 hours. In addition, all of those shadows are attributable to the 5-story portion, none from the 9 stories. And I'll also note, if you look at 9 o'clock, the building casts a similar shadow on that space from itself around the same duration of time. So I hope this has helped you in thinking and understanding some of the decisions that we've made as we come back to you and creating a 9-story building that steps down to 5. These are all important to understand. And now I'd like to turn it over to Jason Korb to talk about the urgent need for affordable apartment homes in Cambridge.
Thank you, Jason. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Jason Korb. I'm the principal of Capstone Communities, and I'm partners with Sean Hope on this project. So at our last full hearing, where we gave a presentation, you provided comments, you asked us about an AHO project. So we did go back and look further into an AHO project, and we followed the guidelines specifically, so we didn't assume any waivers of any sort. And we determined that we could build a 30-unit building. And let me just make a point here. This needs to be financeable. So the number of 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms still need the majority in order to get city and state funding. So this is a financeable AHO project. It's not a bunch of micro units, which I'm not sure whether or not you could do under the AHO, but that's not, we're not interested in building micro units either. We're interested in building high quality, family affordable housing. So you could build 30 apartments, 5 1-beds, 15 2-beds, 10 3-beds. And we determined it was not financeable. And I know there's been some things written about, we don't understand, how is a high rise more expensive than a 6-story podium wood frame building? Well, a lot of fixed costs that you see in a 6-story wood frame building, podium wood frame building, that you do in our 9-story building. The acquisition cost, the same. So instead of dividing it up by 48 units, you divide it up by 30 units. The site work is all the same. You're bringing in water lines, sewer lines, kind of stuff. You still need structural steel in a 6-story building. It's still a podium construction type of building. You still need to build a basement. You still need to put the transformer and the fire suppression room. You need to put the bike room down in the basement. You still need to create a retail storefront on the first floor. You still need to create a garage, and even though the AHO might not require it, the state has made it very clear to us that unless we provide on-site parking for the accessible apartments, our project will not get funded. So you're building the basement, you're building the first floor, you're building the same roof. You have concrete costs, and then you also have all your fixed costs. You have your geotechnical costs. All the same, building the same foundation, right? Waterproofing costs, accounting costs, legal costs, all of these various soft costs, right? Really raise the cost of an AHO project per unit basis. And that's how the state and the city funding sources look at this. They look at what is the cost on a per unit basis. And I just want to make a point. We did look at the cost associated with a high rise. I want to make 2 points associated with that. One is, this is not a heavy gauge steel building, the 9-story structure. This is a light gauge building, light gauge steel, and Jason can answer more questions about that. Okay, so there is some savings to go to wood from a light gauge steel, but this is not like a 20-story tower being built downtown. This is an innovative approach to building that saves a lot of costs. So the old sort of, historic way of thinking you're a high rise, you're going to blow the cost out of the water. Times have changed. Like, we've innovated, and we can do these things now using light gauge. We also did look at, okay, we're going to back out boosters, metallic piping. We did a very careful analysis with our GC. Stair pressurizations, electrical, and I mentioned wood versus light gauge steel, right? So, even when you take all of that into account and you back that out, there's a huge delta on a per unit basis between an AHO project and our project in terms of cost. So I just want to make that point. You also need to stage, you also need the logistics. The site is still a 0 lot line, whether you're an AHO or not. So you can go to the next slide. So we want to address that. I'm happy to provide more specifics, and Jason is as well. So at the last hearing, where we presented a lot of numbers to you, thousands of people, you all know there's thousands and thousands of people on the waiting list looking for affordable housing. So I wanted to provide something that actually was just released, which is a report by the Cambridge Community Foundation called Equity and Innovation Cities, and looking specifically at Cambridge. And Cambridge is considered one of 25 innovation cities across the country. And there's the definition of what an innovation city is. San Francisco, Seattle, Denver, Nashville, a whole bunch of others. They have high concentrations of entrepreneurship, venture capital expenditure, startup activity, lots of tech, lots of biotech, lots of life sciences, like Cambridge. I'm not sure if you've seen this study, but I think it's worthy of going through and not paraphrasing their words, but actually reading their words. Of the 25 innovation cities, Cambridge has the 7th largest gap between average households in the top and bottom quintile. So they divided the income level quintiles, right? Behind only Boston, Atlanta, Washington, New York, Miami, and San Francisco, with the average household income in the high quintile earning 25 times as much as in the lowest quintile. So the highest quintile in Cambridge earns 25 times more than the lowest quintile. We're building family housing here. The report says, and again, this is not paraphrased, children are disappearing from innovation cities nationwide. With the exception of Arlington, Virginia, and Washington, D.C., all of the innovation cities have lost children since 2010. Cambridge ranks among those with the largest decline in the under 18 population and now has the smallest child population of all the innovation cities. Children under 18 make up just 12.4% of the city's population. I'm not sure what that extra part is. Cambridge's rental costs are nearly twice the innovation city median. So this is like the innovation cities, like expensive cities. They're twice the median cost. Cambridge is among the most expensive innovation when it comes to the cost of housing for both owners and renters. And finally, and these are their words, not mine, the hollowing out of middle and low-income households has continued. From 2010 to 2018, the share of households earning less than $50,000 declined from more than 40%, so 40% of the city, right, from 2018 to in 2010, made under 50%, to now, to 2018, just over 26%. Those in the middle income, moderate income, while those earning $50,000 to $99,000, roughly the middle income in Cambridge, fell from 26% to 20%. And on the opposite side, by contrast, the share of households earning over $200,000 more than doubled in Cambridge. And this is not mine again. One of the questions we face as a city is whether, given another opportunity to look at our essential issues and take action to reset the future, we will do so with success, or will a city with both increasing wealth and increasing poverty continue its trajectory toward even greater inequality? We really believe that this building is leading to less inequality, to making things fairer and more just for people that can't afford it. So I think at that, I don't know if I want to turn it, Sean, do you want me to turn it back to you? Close it out?
Thanks, Jason. That completes our initial presentation. We would love to either questions from the board or public comment as you decide.
Sean, before we go to public comment, let me see if the members of the board have comments. I have some, or questions. I have some, but I'll go around the room. Brendan, do you want to?
Brendan Sullivan, no, I don't have any questions at this time.
Jim?
Jim Monteverdi, I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Andrea?
I have no questions, thank you.
And Laura?
No questions, thank you.
Okay. My questions really that I want to ask and get on the record, but I think to educate everyone relate to the construction of this structure. Should we give grant the approval? From the time you, again, assuming approval, the comprehensive permit has been granted, from the time you break ground on the site and take down the restaurant building until they complete the structure, the exterior of the structure, how long will that take? Do you estimate it'll take? I know you can't be specific, but give me some idea.
The exterior of the structure, do you mean 100% construction completion or the exterior is done?
I'm interested in this building, in its construction. It's going to require some large pieces of equipment, 9-story building. I want to know how long that equipment will have to be on site during regular business hours. And also, I'd like to know where the equipment will be stored once after hours, once the the workday is over?
Sure. So to answer your first question, the entire construction period is estimated to be 18 months. But that includes all the finishes are in, all the painting is done, right? So I'm not the general contractor, so I can't tell you exactly, and Jason, please weigh in as well. You know, maybe it's 13 months of cranes and big pieces of equipment around the site until the building is buttoned up, and then they're just doing interior work. The second question, what you're asking us is, you know, we develop a construction mitigation plan with the city. We work with traffic and parking, DPW, adjacent landowners for parking. So it's a bit of putting the cart in front of the horse at this point because we don't have our approvals. But you know, we would have to go out and we'll follow all of the rules with regards to construction that the city has. And we would work with the DPW. You know, I wouldn't want to speak for DPW as well, in terms of saying I'm going to put my vehicles here or this there without them weighing in. So,
Okay, thank you.
Sean, you want to? Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I'm wondering, are you asking for specifically what the construction equipment that would be different for a 9-story building or versus a smaller building?
I'm interested, I think I want to know, because it leads to the next question about the traffic lanes being reduced, if any. When you're bringing in big equipment, it's got to sit on the street. And I say big, I'm talking, you know, generally. If that's the case, will the traffic lanes be reduced? Will some traffic lanes not be open for transport, you know, for going back and forth while the building is being built? We're talking about a dense neighborhood, a highly trafficked neighborhood, and with regard to Walden Street, a neighborhood that's got traffic challenges. I want to know better what the challenges are.
Yeah, my guess is that they're going to have to take the sidewalk, just like most construction sites. They have to take the sidewalks, and then the sidewalk itself will probably get moved into one lane of traffic on Walden Street. How long that occurs? Is there a way that you can open it up at certain times, like weekends, things like that? That's all type of things that we work out with the DPW. Just like in any urban environment that has lots of traffic challenges, you know, in order to build these buildings, there are inconveniences associated with them.
And I would say this is very similar to the construction you see all along Mass Ave. I understand that Walden Street is not Mass Ave, but I think Cambridge has major thoroughfares and it has side streets. The same way, oftentimes that you do schedules off peak hours. I think the DPW holds a weekly meeting with advance notice to mitigate exactly what you're talking about. So I would say that this building that we're proposing is not in any more of a uniquely dense area than really any stretch of Mass Ave. I think that we would use the best practices in terms of trying to mitigate what's already going on Walden Street, and also recognizing that Mass Ave is also a busy thoroughfare and having to balance which one's going to have the least impact. But I would not say this is novel. I don't think that the extra stories that we're proposing from what the comments are going to really increase the construction in a way that would be anything atypical from what you see in an urban environment for construction.
Thank you. The bus stop in front of, will that be continuing in operation while construction's going on Mass Ave? You know, I'm referring to, right by the...
Yeah, it's something we need to work out with the MBTA in the city.
You don't have an answer yet?
No.
Okay.
It's premature at this point. But the intent would be, if it can't be in front of the building, it would be relocated to a temporary location.
I do know that as you asked this question, we have said some of these things are premature. One of the things that we did try to do, and we are continuing to do, is we reached out to the Russell Apartments ownership. We wanted to have a conversation about construction mitigation. My opinion, and I think our opinion, was a lot of the anxiety that you hear from Russell residents, they can speak for themselves though, but we interpreted was the concern during construction. And so we wanted to get ahead of that and have a conversation with ownership to find out, in addition to the best practices that happen throughout, were there other things unique to that population that we could do to help mitigate the experience during construction. Unfortunately, I think due to the tenor of the discussion, there wasn't a desire to meet with us in ownership. But we recognize there is a vulnerable population, probably those who have not experienced construction. I do believe that the residents there were recently moved in, so the idea of construction, we believe, was understandably concerning. But we did reach out, and we are continuing to reach out to find out if there are specific things that we could do above and beyond normal mitigation to help any proposed construction, because we recognize whether it's 7, 8-story building, it's going to be construction in an urban environment.
Thank you. We will next up, before I open the matter up to public testimony, and members of the board have another opportunity to ask any questions now if they wish to ask.
I have none.
Okay. Not hearing anything from anyone else, I assume that there is no need for other comments. So we'll open up to public comment, testimony. And here's where I want to emphasize, try. I make the same speech all the time, and it's never heated. But the fact of the matter is, this is obviously a very project that's drawn a lot of public interest. And I suspect we're going to have a lot of public comments. I ask that if someone has made the point that you want to make already, please don't say me too. We're not going to count heads and make a decision based upon how many say yes and how many say no. But you will make the evening very painful and needlessly drawn out. The other thing is you'll get 2 minutes to speak, each person who wishes to speak. After a minute and a half, Cynthia will signal that you got 30 seconds left. At the end of those 30 seconds, we're going to cut off the mics. We just can't have people just speaking beyond the limits that we've placed, because I don't think the benefit outweighs the certain negatives of endless repeating of things that we've heard before. We get it. Trust us. Cynthia, do you have any idea how many people are in the queue?
Well, right now we have 21 people and counting, raising their hands.
Sorry,
20, it's going up to 30, 35, 40 people.
So at this point, let's say 30 people.
45 people. It's a lot of people raising their hands right now.
Okay, and presumably public comments
50.
may spark other public comments. Hopefully not, but that's likely to be the case. So again, another rules. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. We'll try to give you an advance warning if you're running out of those 2 minutes. And at the end of the 2 minutes, we're going to have on, and you'll have to end your comments. So with that, I will now open the matter up to public testimony. Any members of the public who wish to speak should now click the icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen, excuse me, that says raise hand. If you're calling in by phone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and unmute or mute by pressing *6. We'll have our first speaker.
Yeah, I'm going to call on city council members first. Alana Milan.
Thank you. Chairman Alexander and members of the Board of Zoning Appeals, thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. My name is Alana Mallon, and I'm currently serving on the Cambridge City Council, and I'm here in full support of the proposed development at 2072 Mass Ave. What's before this board tonight is a request for a comprehensive permit under Chapter 40B, the State of Massachusetts Affordable Housing Law. As Chair Alexander mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, this is not a typical BZA meeting that deals with variances and special permits that affect only a few residents at a time. Instead, the state legislature is asking this board to consider the entire regional need for more affordable housing. As the chair mentioned, the whole point of Chapter 40B is to allow the BZA to override local zoning in favor of the paramount concern for where more affordable housing is needed, and that local boards can still approve affordable housing projects even when a city has hit its 10%, as we have, given that regional need. The city solicitor opined that while we have hit our 10%, the board needs to determine whether the regional need for low and moderate income housing outweighs local concerns. The strong regional need ensures that we must continue to create and preserve affordable housing here in Cambridge. And given the number of our residents who are severely rent burdened, spending more than 50% of their salaries on rent, we must acknowledge that we have a critical need for more affordable housing in Cambridge. As someone who has worked with so many residents of this city who were and still are in danger of being displaced, I can personally attest that there simply is not enough homes for these residents. To illustrate this point, Frost Terrace, an affordable housing building in Porter Square by the same builder, announced their lottery winners for those homes and report that they had close to 1,000 applications for 40 units. 900 families and residents were told, sorry, not this time. Finch Apartments on Concord Avenue received 2,600 amount of applications for their 98 homes. There are over 10,000 people on the CHA waiting list. Simply put, we have an affordable housing shortage, and it's massive. We've heard from those who say these homes won't solve that massive housing shortage, and they're right, it won't. But that's not a reason not to approve this project without reducing the number of homes. Every unit will make a difference, every home a lifeline for residents, many of whom you know as your children's paraprofessional in their classroom, your local coffee shop employee, and other community members whose entire support system and history is here in Cambridge. The COVID-19 pandemic revealed just how important access to safe, affordable housing is. The public affordable housing is. The public health crisis was exacerbated by low-income residents who work multiple jobs just to afford those high rents, or had doubled up with family and friends to save on housing costs. We saw the devastation that disproportionately hit our low-income and largely Black and Brown neighbors and community members. We as a must learn from that lesson and create access to safe, affordable housing to ensure that our neighbors and our community is never that vulnerable again. There are a great many voices that we'll hear from this evening on why this project shouldn't be built, but I want to bring into the room that... Sorry?
We're going to move on. Remember I said there'd be a 2-minute time to speak, and I've used just 2 minutes.
Well, I just want to say, on behalf of these families, I'm respectfully asking the board fulfill its duty as pertains to the state 40B chapter laws and override local height and density in the current zoning in favor of the paramount concern for more affordable housing. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
You're welcome. Next, Cynthia.
Hang on. Mark McGovern.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, members of the board, thank you for this opportunity. My name is Mark McGovern. I reside at 17 Pleasant Street, and I am a member of the Cambridge City Council. I'm here to speak in favor of the 100% affordable housing proposal at 2072 Mass Ave. Over the past several years, the City Council and the City Administration have made several efforts to promote and support the creation of affordable housing in our city. 5 years ago, more than tripled the incentive zoning amount commercial developers must contribute to affordable housing. We then increased the inclusionary zoning percentage from 11.5% to 20%. Last year, we worked with the city to increase the amount of money the city puts towards affordable housing from roughly $10 million per year to approximately $30 million per year. In this term, we passed the affordable housing overlay to make the building of 100% affordable housing more financially viable. These actions were driven by the majority of residents who continue to indicate that affordable housing is their highest priority. In fact, in January, the council discussed the most recent city survey that once again placed affordable housing as the top concern, ranking it above education, traffic, development, and even COVID. In addition to meeting the goals set by the city and the city council, this project falls in line with many of the recommendations made in the Envision Cambridge report, one of which states, quote, enable more housing, including affordable housing, to be built along major corridors and in the areas that have the capacity to accommodate growth and are well served by transit, end quote. Virtually everyone agrees that affordable housing is important. The question is, how important? The concerns you are hearing, traffic, parking, shadows, and design, may be important, but they are not more important than people having an affordable place to live. Homes for people should be the top priority. So the question for you is, what priorities will you set tonight? Will you place traffic over homes for people? Shadows over homes for people? Parking over homes for people? The difference between 7 stories and 9 stories will be virtually unnoticeable. But the people who would live in the homes that will be lost, that difference will be devastating. Recently, you were described as the last line of defense against this project. Instead of seeing you as defenders against affordable housing, I would rather see you as partners in forwarding the city's goals and objectives that are the main concern of the majority of people in our city. All the words and sentiments in support of affordable housing.
Mr. McGovern, your 2 minutes are up. Thank you very much.
Sumbul Siddiqui.
Good evening, everyone. Chairman Alexander and members of the BZA. Thank you for allowing me to speak. As many of you know, Cambridge has been my home since I was 2 years old. When I came here from Pakistan with my family. We were able to move to Cambridge because of the affordable housing, which is why I'm here this evening to speak in favor of the project. My passion to push for more affordable housing is both personal and professional. I grew up with many of the families that we often speak about. I know their struggles. They were my family's struggles too. And I often think about the opportunities I had because of growing up in Cambridge, from Head Start to affordable housing. I wouldn't be here without these opportunities. And that's why it's so important to invest in affordable housing and keep families here. But we can't do that without our support, our real support. And that means investing in these affordable housing units. There's been a lot of talk about the aesthetics of the building and the design, how people don't think families would want to live here. And I've got to say, I don't understand where some people are getting that notion. Families I know and grew up with would love to live in these units. I would have loved to live there too. Many people look at the Ringe Towers where I grew up and have made statements about how these buildings look. And sometimes I really felt that child and I was embarrassed. And as someone reflecting on that, I've realized how much I loved my home. I don't remember the times the elevator wasn't working. And yes, that's 3 elevators for 22 floors. I loved having a home and making friends in those buildings. And so I would say I would be really proud to live in these units. And these units are homes for families who would otherwise not be able to afford to live in our community. So I won't repeat what's been said. All I'll say is I think it's imperative that we keep as many families as we can here close to the resources and opportunities that make Cambridge what it is. So I really hope that you take that into account. So thank you so much and take care.
Thank you.
Denise Simmons.
Thank you. I want to thank members of the BZA for allowing me to speak in strong favor of the proposed development at 27-2 Massachusetts Avenue. My name is Denise Simmons. I'm serving on my 10th term on the City Council, and I'd like to talk to you just briefly about the broader context of citywide affordable housing overlay district that the council passed last year. Since the loss of rent control in the mid-90s, we see housing prices absolutely skyrocket in the city. This coincided with the period where our tech sector gave great momentum, drawing in workers from across the planet to work in Kendall Square. And many of those folks, understandably, have wanted to live close to where they work, and we welcome them. But these biotech workers have brought with them salaries that have allowed them to pay far greater rents than many of the longtime Cambridge residents that are now competing against in the housing market. And more, we've seen our teachers, our nannies, our home health aides, our convenience store workers, our firefighters, our police officers getting pushed out of the community, our community, because they can't afford the increasing rents. Fortunately, the only realistic way that they're going to be able to afford to keep these folks in Cambridge is to allow for the creation of affordable housing units. And that's led the City Council to approach this from a variety of different angles. In recent years, it's led us to triple our levy so that developers of commercial buildings pay a higher amount per square foot. Our Affordable Housing Trust led us to update our inclusionary zoning to roughly double the amount of permanently affordable housing units that now will be included in all residential buildings of 10 or more units. In the last year, it was up to our city, and we did pass the Affordable Housing Overlay District. It is just a little bit for developers of affordable units to be able to build, like CHA, just to start homeowners rehab, to purchase land and develop buildings that will be 100% permanently affordable. None of these tools represent a silver bullet, but none of them will meet the demand of the tens of thousands of people that are currently on the various housing lists. The building 70 Massachusetts Avenue meet all the requirements.
Excuse me, Ms. Simmons, I appreciate your comments, but your 2 minutes are up and we do have to have other people speak. You just wrap up in a few.
Sir, I was timing myself. I was about to wrap up. At the end, I'll just say the project at 2770 Massachusetts Avenue represents a real chance to house 48 families that Cambridge might otherwise lose forever. That's not an abstraction. These are real people. I urge you to take this opportunity, not to take this opportunity away from them. Thank you for your consideration.
And thank you for taking the time to speak to us.
Okay. Dennis Carlin.
Thank you for letting me speak. I'm going to take a perspective on this and talk about the project specific. The 70-foot high-rise code does impact housing costs. And it's not just me saying that, it's the city of Cambridge saying that in their Envision study and their studies for Kendall Square and Central Square. It's in the reports. It adds about 30% extra costs. Now, but going beyond that is that this is a precedent-setting hearing. And you know that as a board of the BZA, that people will come back. What this also says is the AHO doesn't work on such sites, that 30 units doesn't work. I don't believe that for a moment. And I hope you don't as well. Now, you've also heard that people felt ashamed because they grew up in such places when their friends made comments. That's a shame. Well, this building does not fit in. And I'm not just talking about the height. Yeah, it's fancy looking, but we should be building a city where you can't tell what's affordable, what's different. It should fit in as part of a context. That's all a background building. And that's not saying you can't have a handsome building. Many background buildings are the most handsome we have. So I am not for this. I think it sets a terrible precedent. And the city were really interested, we would be using our own land for further housing. We would be purchasing our own land through the Cambridge Redevelopment Authority. I'm the guy that's pushed for more funding and has gotten it. And I'm all for affordable housing. I just believe it should fit in and the AHO set the standard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Alan Sadin.
Hi, my name is Alan Sadoun. I live at 17 Pleasant Place. I support the project. I have two quick things to say. The first is that every time I see the rendering of the view up Walden Street, I'm struck by how much it looks like the view of the Putnam Square building at Putnam Ave in Mount Auburn, which is a very inoffensive building in a very similar context. And the Putnam Square building doesn't even have a step down like this building is proposing. Once this building has been built for a few years, I think it will be thought of as very natural. The second thing is that we just heard a discussion of the precedent this project would set if it were approved. I think the precedent it would set is that Cambridge supports affordable housing, smart growth, transit-oriented development, climate resiliency, and generally giving people places to live. I think that's a good precedent. Thank you.
Christopher Schmidt.
Christopher Schmidt, 17 Laurel Street. I'd like to refer to the chair's quotes earlier. He explained that I make the same speech every time and it's never heated. And I feel that way very much about the BZA with this project and other affordable housing projects. We continue to say we want more affordable housing, but you heard it from other public speakers, you've heard it from the letters you've gotten, you've heard it over and over and over again. There is no better place to put a 9-story building in Cambridge than on Mass Ave. There is no better place to put more people than on our corridors near transit, near grocery stores, near everything else. I cannot imagine a better place for a project of this type. I am disappointed that the board has already pushed for fewer families to be able to live here and fewer people and fewer children to live in our city. I think that is not the city that we are, and it's not the city we espouse to be. And I think that we must do better. We live in a city. Buildings are tall in cities. That is a thing that happens, and we should accept that and move forward with that and allow more people to live here to become a better place. Thanks.
Michael Hoff.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Michael Hoff. I live at 80 Foster Street. I grew up in Porter Square, and I hope this project is approved because progress has always been possible there. When thinking about my home neighborhood, I hear that if some of the best parts of it were to be proposed in today's political climate, they'd be stifled. Today, we don't know old Sears building is out of place, but would that be blocked now as too big for that stretch of Mass Ave? Would we even allow Leslie University in today? Or if the commuter rail stop at Porter was being put in now, would a vocal minority of neighbors who didn't want the nighttime noise rally to stop it? And would we relent to their concerns? For me, I benefited from earlier generations' foresight and openness to progress. And so I didn't even think twice about these features of the neighborhood. Now, as the city evolves and affordable housing and environmental concerns are at the forefront of all of our minds, why should we stop these affordable units that are centrally located for walking and multiple forms of transit from being built? Soon enough, even at 9 stories, 2072 Mass Ave will blend in and people won't think twice about it, just as these sounds of the train rumbling by at night are just part of the neighborhood. We should not be the ones to drop the baton and stop progress in its tracks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Matthew LeBeau.
Hi, my name is Matt LeBeau, and I live at 1558 Massachusetts Avenue. I want to express my strong support for this project, which provides sorely needed affordable housing in Cambridge. This is a walkable development that advances the city's climate and housing goals. And I encourage the board to consider whether the local concerns voiced here will truly outweigh the life-changing benefit that this project could provide to so many families that deserve it. Year after year, Cambridge residents rate affordable housing as the #1 issue the city faces. It's time that we walk the walk and actually build the housing that we say we want.
Thank you.
Lisa Dreer.
Hello, my name is Lisa Dreyer. I'm a Cambridge native and a homeowner on Cogswell Avenue, located 1 block away from this project. I strongly oppose the current design of this project and believe it should be redesigned to reduce the mass size and impact on vulnerable abutters. The greatest impact of this building will be on the most vulnerable residents in the immediate surroundings, the senior and disabled residents of the low-income apartments at Russell Building. 70% of the residents of that building, 38 out of 54 people, have signed a letter in opposition to this project. And I implore the board to listen to the voices of those residents as they request your consideration. Other abutters whose property line directly connects to the city parking lot right behind this building on Walden Street and Creighton Street also strongly oppose the project. So those are numerous people withstanding to appeal any decision that be made tonight. In addition, 610 immediate neighbors of the project have signed a petition in opposition, expressing concern about the mass, the size, the lack of context. Note that 98% of the buildings between Harvard Square and Alewife are 6 stories or less. The 9 stories and the mass in this very traffic congested area is highly problematic in addition to the impact on Russell. The current proposal is not responsive to the mandate that this board gave the developers back in December. We request the board to either deny the permit or request a redesign of the building to 6 stories in front, stepping down to 3 stories in back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry. Camila Elvis.
Hi, my name is Camilla Elvis, 28 Linnean Street. I grew up in the Porter Square neighborhood in case proximity matters. But what I would say is that I heard earlier from the presentation that this fulfills many of the goals and many of the recommendations of the Envision Cambridge process, which is inherently going to be more representative of this community and this city's desires than the people who show up at these meetings or sign petitions. The city spent millions of dollars doing this, reaching out to people, not asking people to come to this meeting on a Thursday night to get their desires. And it meets our needs for climate resilience, for energy efficiency, for building up Mass Ave, providing affordable homes. I mean, Cambridge has a responsibility as a transit supporting city, provide housing that is transit oriented and to provide housing for plenty of people to do that. It is the biggest thing we can do to support the environment. And I just really that you'll weigh the 3-year community process of Envision Cambridge more heavily than the people who self-select and choose to come to meet like this. And in particular, the needs of the city as a whole compared to those in a small radius around this one building. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Phone number ending 5438.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Jessica Sheehan. I live at 48 Fairmont Street, and I strongly support this project. We keep saying we need more affordable housing, but somehow when it comes time to approve it, it's still a fight. Every time, regardless of how good the project is. So let me just say, this project isn't just good, it's great. It's exactly what Cambridge residents have been asking for. Abutters have been fully, and they've already been granted several concessions. So now is the time to back up all our pretty words with action. Please approve these desperately needed homes. All of them. Yeah.
Thank you.
Azra Kubelius.
Hello, thank you. I'm Oshra Kavilius. I'm a close neighbor at 21 Cogswell Ave, and I strongly oppose this project, not because I oppose affordable housing, but that I support affordable housing at safe locations. And anybody who knows that intersection, Walden Street and Mass Ave, knows that that's not a safe location. I can't imagine putting 50 kids on bikes coming out on Walden Street. It just would put them at risk. The other reason I support not granting this petition is because of the Russell Apartments that house senior and elderly right next to this proposed project. So folks, I support affordable housing, but not at that unsafe location. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lauren Crow.
My name is Lauren Crow. I live on Museum Way and support to not only support this application, but to make a strong statement rejecting the pettiness we're hearing from the folks who oppose the creation of more housing in Cambridge. I'm actually upset that the developers felt the need to trim homes out of this building. It's time, long past time, for us to reject the idea that somebody's minor inconvenience is a way to stop somebody from living here. 5 minutes looking for parking doesn't trump somebody's house. They're not comparable. A few moments of shade does not trump somebody's house. And if you're arguing against somebody having a home in Cambridge boils down to the fact that you might have to look at it, that just doesn't need to be taken seriously. The only reason we all get to live here is because somebody made a place for us. And now some folks in the city have made a hobby out of denying that same privilege to others. The people who are going to move into those units don't have less of a right to live here than we do. Because who among us isn't someone else's minor inconvenience? Who among us lives in a house that couldn't be a nice green space? And who are these people who live in places that don't cast shadows? May the Cambridge resident not taking up space, parking, sunshine, travel, transit, throw the first stone. We live shoulder to shoulder, but that doesn't mean we're fighting over scarce resources. The only thing that's limited about Cambridge is the vision of folks who can't see what's Cambridge great is the people who live here. This project should be approved and 20 more should come right behind it. We need more homes because we need more Cambridge. We make miracles here. To grow up here is to be one of the luckiest people in human history. Our main exports are hope, cures, knowledge, and solutions. And our potential as a city is only limited by the amount of people we're allowed to live here. The amount of people who will allow to live here is only limited by the extent to which you're willing to deny people homes so as not to minorly inconvenience someone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Margaret Reuter.
Unmute. Can you hear?
Yes.
Hello, I'm Margaret Reeder. I am a resident of the Russell Apartments next door at 2050 Mass Ave. And it's hard to sit here and hear other people cast stones for those of us that have concern for this project. It was also hard to hear tonight Sean Hope suggest that it was due to the tenor that I turned down a meeting that he invited me to with the executive director of Cambridge Housing Authority. The reason I turned that down was in order to ask for a private meeting with our landlord, the Cambridge Housing Authority. You know, I have to say, I think the rollout of this project could be a case study in mismanagement. And I don't think anybody in Cambridge should feel too good about it. And I may be a resident of affordable housing at this moment, but I've paid my taxes for many, many years, worked for the city of Cambridge. And the sloppy errors, procedural violations, missing renderings, not even one of our side of the building. Most everybody is talking about this building is looking from Mass Ave. It is so much more than that. And I guess one of the things I want to say is that 70% of us here at Russell would like to
Minute and a half.
Okay. Do not approve this design. We believe in Envision, and Envision says light, noise, privacy, and context matter. The new proposal tonight gives no difference and no change from the beginning proposal, where the buildings intersect at their rear footing. The building continues on at 102 feet in height for 17 more feet along Walden Street before it steps down. The steps down came about because the height of the building was communicated incorrectly.
That was 2 minutes.
Okay.
Young Kim.
Good evening. This is Young Kim at 17 Norris Street. Mr. Corbett and Attorney Hope should be commended for their passion and dedication to providing affordable housing in Cambridge. However, the proposed 2072 Mass Avenue project alone can solve the critical need for affordable housing, nor are they providing such housing purely out of their altruism. Currently, there are more than 600 affordable housing units in various stages of development. We just completed units at Finch Cambridge and Frost Terrace, some in the AHO pipeline, and 15 affordable homeownership undergoing 40B process. With all these new affordable housing units, CCHRE should be able to work more cooperatively with community to reduce the density of 2072 Mass Avenue to fit better in the neighborhood. The 40B process calls for community outreach from the beginning at the conceptual stages. And all this discussion we are having with the community and the developers should have been done at the beginning, not at this point. The developers keep talking about working with the city agencies, but they did not talk to the community. Only community was reached out only at the end, toward the time were ready to submit their application to the funding agency. Please require CCHRE to negotiate the community in good faith to come up with a compromise plan that will fulfill your request as well as the intention of 40B guidelines, which were established by state to guide city, the developer, and neighborhood in order to arrive at a win-win solution for developing critically needed affordable housing at the same time safeguarding the needs of the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Federico Muknik.
Hello. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm all for affordable housing, but 9 stories on Mass Ave? You might as well tear down the block across the street where Wasabi and other businesses are and just go for another building at 12 stories. Additionally, the mock-ups of the building are a blocky bunker-style building that's, let's face it, ugly. Have you not seen the already boxy condos built a block away? They stand in stark contrast to a beautiful church. You've opted for efficiency and convenience over beauty and livability. For a comparison, look at your proposal, then look at the elegant Henderson carriage house across the way. Additionally, have you walked outside of London? I have. I teach there. Have you not felt the wind tunnels these immense buildings create? I know Canterburyans are going to be thrilled, especially the seniors next door, as they navigate the wind tunnels of November through March. And has anyone ever spent rush hour on the corner of Walden and Mass Ave? Do you really want to aggravate the matter? Is no one aware of the ripple effects this will have on the streets leading from the interior to Mass Ave? By the way, no one uses the parking at the fast food place. There are rarely more than 2 or 3 cars parked in there. You're adding more cars. It's clear to me that Capstone and the city are working together to get this done, regardless of public opinion. There's nothing to be done. I'm all for affordable housing, but I'm really all for reasonably designed affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pamela Winters.
Okay, good evening. Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to say that I agree with Dennis Carlone on this issue. I feel as though the building, my name is Pamela Winters. I live at 41 Orchard Street. The building is way too large for this. There's no green space around it. It dwarfs the abutting buildings. There's not parking for at least 20. There is not parking for at least the 25 or more cars that will be there. And this is setting a bad example for other buildings that developers would consider. And it also increases the canyonization of Mass Ave. The developers are applying for a comprehensive permit, but please keep in mind that the neighbors will be looking at this building for at least 100 years. And I feel that psychologically, architecture has impact on people and neighborhoods. The lack of setbacks and the color makes it even more impactful. We now have over 6 signatures from neighbors that are against this project as is. Maybe the developers could look at other affordable housing in the city, such as Just a Start, and see how affordable housing can nicely fit into the neighborhood. There will be at least 200 new residents in the building. This is a concern that residents, pedestrians, and cyclists will be compromised at this very busy intersection. And if the city approves the traffic in this area, they could certainly improve the traffic without this building even being there. Finally, I'm concerned about the seniors next door, which is also affordable. This will only be 4 feet away, will probably be 2 years or more of
Minute and a half.
Am I all through? Is that 2 minutes?
No, you have 30 seconds.
Oh, okay. They permanently lose their light and privacy. There's going to be at least 2 years of construction here. Cambridge has almost 15% affordable housing, and Chapter 40 of the Mass General Law says that unless you have less than 10%, you don't have to erect more. And please keep in mind that Cambridge is one of the densest cities in the country for our population. Somerville is another. I hope that the BZA recognizes these issues and will reject this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you for taking the time.
Neil Miller.
Hi, Neil Miller, 104 Pearl Street, Apartment B. Just wanted to say that I support this project. We have a housing crisis, we have a climate crisis, and this project goes to addressing that. One other quick note, I live in Cambridgeport, and down the street from me is the LBJ Homes CHA property on Erie Street. They're taller than the project, even its initial proposal. They're even further away from Mass Ave, from a main travel corridor. They're taller than the houses around it, but I think that hasn't been a problem. They are a community space. They're the polling place for Ward 5, my polling place. I am vice chair of the Ward 5 Democratic Committee, and we have our monthly meetings there. Before COVID, we had our caucuses there every year, 2 or 3 years ago, and we hope again the next year we're having our cookouts. They're open to everyone, and they're a great chance for people brought together by the place that they live in to meet each other. And it hasn't been a problem. I think this is in an even better location, and I hope the BZA approves it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Susan Frankel.
Hi, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. My name is Frankel. I live 300 feet from 2072 Mass Ave, right off of Walden Street. I strongly oppose this proposed development for many reasons. I really urge you to listen to the people who live near the intersection and know how dangerous it is. The developer continues to speak about the massing on Mass Ave, but we should really recognize the massing on Walden Street and the massing to Russell. So 9 stories, 102 feet, goes 74 feet down Walden Street, same amount that's on Mass Ave. So now you have a small street that's got a 102-foot building going down 74 feet. Then ups to 60 feet in height and goes another 40 feet down Walden Street. Now, Walden, as you know, is 2- and 3-story homes. So this is very intrusive from a building perspective. It's way out of context, and it completely ignores the spirit of the affordable housing overlay. I would also ask you to consider that 102-foot tall portion of the building goes beyond the back of Russell. And so those vulnerable residents lose privacy, they lose light to their only outdoor space, and they also lose privacy and light to their only community room. If we are concerned about affordable housing residents, we should be equally concerned with the residents of Russell Apartments. I think it's really important to note not about the 600 plus signatures of people who have signed a petition in opposition of this proposed development, but 70% of the residents of Russell, many of whom feel afraid about their housing security, have signed this petition. And it's also important to note that many of the neighbors around Frost Terrace, the previous affordable housing construction project by the same developer, have also signed the petition. So please take that into consideration
2 minutes.
as you're considering this.
Thank you.
Jackson Moore Auto.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for giving me the chance to speak tonight. My name is Jackson Moore Auto, address is 9 Doan Street, and I would like to express my strong support for this project. I just want to highlight really favorable climate aspects of this proposed project, specifically the transit-oriented development. This is along an MBTA key bus route, the 77, and it's also very accessible by Red Line and commuter rail. The MBTA has recently been improving commuter rail, and there's strong momentum for further increased service. And we know that most impactful things cities can do to address the climate crisis is to build dense infill housing that reduces the need for people to drive. And this is exactly that sort of housing. So I strongly support this. And this is in addition to other environmental benefits such as all electric HVAC and a solar array. This is a really wonderful project, and I hope that it will be approved of with as many units as possible. Each further unit is an additional amount of carbon reduction and additional climate impact. Thank you.
Thank you.
Matthew Aronson.
Hi there. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. My name is Matthew Aronson, homeowner at 122 Reed Street, strongly support project. I'm also a national expert in youth and mental homelessness, help communities around the country develop their coordinated community responses to prevent and end youth and mental homelessness, including for the cities of Boston and Hampden County, Franklin County. I work with New York City and a lot of communities around the country. And one of the most important pillars of preventing and ending homelessness is supply side. It's not the only thing we need to do, one of the biggest things that we need to do. We know from evidence, not conjecture, that most communities around the country, including Greater Boston, including Cambridge, are thousands of units behind the development need as far as in relation to population growth. And I want to point out that this conversation is in no way novel. When we look at around the country and their search for building affordable housing, Financing is often not the problem. Prime example is Los Angeles, hundreds of millions of dollars 2 years ago in permits for housing. Why have they made significant progress? One of the primary reasons is because they can't cite housing because of local, not in my backyard opposition. They may feel like real concerns, they may be real concerns, but the truth of the matter is that what we were doing is standing in the way of affordable housing development. Cambridge has one of the highest cost of housing relative as a percent of area median income. We're at over 38%. And there's evidence from the last 2 years from representative sample communities around the country that if you're above 31%, you see a stark increase, an inflection point in homelessness. So something that Councilman McGovern said, I would say a little bit more strongly, this is absolutely about the choice of shadow, about traffic, about comfort of what you see, and folks literally experiencing homelessness in the city of Cambridge. If we care about that, we need to approve affordable housing projects like this. Thank you so much.
Lauren Curry.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I would just like to speak very briefly. My address is 3 Concord Ave in Cambridge. I'd like to speak very briefly as someone who was a member of the committee of the Envision Cambridge, who spent 2 years speaking with people and receiving information from people throughout the city on what people's priorities were for housing in the city. And this is exactly what we were hearing a need for and what we included in the priorities in Envision Cambridge. Exactly the kind of density that would be needed and the location in the heavily used corridors of the city. And I just want to speak from a different perspective as somebody who lives in a 6-story apartment building on Concord Ave that was built over 100 years ago. And that must have been pretty surprising and shocking to people who were living here almost 100 years ago. But this building has housed thousands of people in the century since it was built at 6 stories. And I think the lesson that I'm trying to draw is that we need to be open to the future. And a future that includes a 9-story building a century later on Mass Ave, I think is one that we can accept, especially in light of the
30 seconds.
The issues that Mr. Core brought up from the Cambridge Community Foundation report, making room for a future that will have low-income people be able to stay and not have the city turn into just a completely high-income deal is really important, and this is an important building for helping to accomplish that goal. Thank you, and I support it, and I hope you will support it.
Thank you for taking the time to speak.
C. Pierola.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
My name is Costanza Negros Piera, and I live in 47 Porter Road. I'm a longtime resident, and I've been fighting for affordable housing for like 40 years, practically, since I've lived here. And many of us in this group are not petty NIMBYs, as some divisive contributors have said, but actually activists that are caring about how we integrate different types of people in the city and how we retain the rich diversity that we have. So I really need to figure out why people are using this argument when we spent millions of hours and money discussing this many years, including the AHO, which took 2 years of process. And it provides a perfect formula that everybody agreed on, not that the developers decide what's financial feasible. Now, the last thing I wanted to say was that the BZA came up with 2 determinations, not how Sean said, a whole bunch of evolving ideas. And the 2 determinations were to lower 2 floors of the building, provide financial proof about why those alternatives were not possible. And thank you, Dennis, for telling us that a cost of going over 70 feet, 30%. That is just a clear
30
number,
seconds.
first number that we have received. We've asked for the numbers from the developers, and we heard what they said tonight, but we're not financial geniuses. We don't know how to put all those numbers together, but many communities can do this and do this with the community. By the way, whoever they're saying they're listening to, it's not the abutters and it's not the people who are nearby. It might be one person and maybe two.
That's 2 minutes.
The design for. So please, against this project.
Itamar Turner Toring.
Hi, my name is Itamar Turner Toring. I'm speaking in support of this project. I was listening to the previous meeting and a few members of the board talked about the massing and the size in context. And just 2 blocks away, I believe, is 2130 Mass Ave. So as you can see from just the street numbers, it's really close by, 2072 and 2130. It's 8 stories tall. It's been there since 1981, so since I was 1 year old. And apparently the neighborhood has managed to survive this this 8-story building. Everything's fine. Still a nice area. And so I don't really understand this idea that adding another building the exact same size, slightly taller, but basically the size, is somehow this extreme precedent, especially when it will allow a very large number of affordable housing. So again, please support this. And this isn't some unique change. This is just a standard building on Mass Ave. Thank you.
Thank you.
Marcelo Marchetti.
Good evening. My name is Marcelo Marchetti. I'm a homeowner in Walden Mews, nearby, right on Walden Street. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I oppose the proposed development as is in that intersection because of the lack of safety. And also I want to comment that the 2 examples that have been bandied around about other 8 or 9-story buildings on Mass Avenue in the vicinity, it's a little bit disingenuous because both buildings are recessed by several feet from the sidewalk and they are not towering over a small street, they are towering over Mass Ave. I have a comment or a question. I am unclear about how the focus on public transportation will be encouraged by building this property. What is it going to have that it's special other than not having parking, which will probably increase the parking problems in the area that is already fairly limited? I agree that the city of Cambridge needs to offer affordable housing, but I'm more interested in affordable housing for ownership instead of rentals if we want to keep that population to which we will be providing housing. The city has only 34% ownership. Rentals, in my view, are not the solution. And also, already dense areas such as North Cambridge should not be overdeveloped. Okay? I think that a credible urban plan and affordable housing plan for the city of Cambridge is still pending with a vision to the future, but it's not here yet. Lastly, I am a little bit perturbed that several supporters of the project have disqualified or demonized those of us who are opposed to the project as presented. I don't think that that's the Cambridge way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Matt Goldstein.
Hi, I'm Matt Goldstein, a homeowner on Clarendon Avenue. I've lived in Cambridge for over 20 years and have 2 children in the Cambridge public schools. I want to voice my strong support for the 2072 project. We live directly across the street from the Daniel Burns apartment building, a 200-unit affordable housing complex. And the single point I want to make tonight is that the the Burns Apartments, the public housing project, allows folks who grew up in Cambridge to remain in Cambridge. So I thank you for letting me speak, and I urge you to approve the project.
Thank you.
David Olson.
Hello, my name is David Olson and I live at 2130 Mass Ave, about 1 block from the proposed project. I speak tonight in opposition to the project. When I first moved here 11 years ago, my understanding was that no buildings of significant height would be built due to zoning regulations. I am disappointed it may no longer be the case. I feel like I'm getting in late on this discussion as I only happened to see a sign posted at the site a few days ago. The fact is, in my opinion, 9 stories is too tall and will negatively impact my personal quality of life, not to mention the resale value of my home should I choose to. I know it's probably selfish of me to think only about my experience, but that's the only perspective I have, which is why I feel compelled to speak against this project right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tina Alu.
Good evening. My name is Tina Alu, and I live at 113.5 Pleasant Street. I'm speaking tonight as the director of CEOC, Cambridge's anti-poverty agency, on behalf of our participants. One of whom called us today in tears because she finally received notice that she had received an affordable unit. These calls come much too infrequently. I'm speaking tonight to express my support for the revised proposal. Precious time has been lost in the debate over the size of the project, thus delaying construction, even though there is an affordable housing crisis in Cambridge, worsened by what has been the most challenging time for our city. The initial review of this project began at the height of the pandemic, when hundreds of Cambridge residents were unable to pay their rent and would have faced eviction if it wasn't for the moratorium and the city's generous rental assistance funding. These families haven't had the luxury of organizing petition signings to show their support of affordable housing because they've been struggling to find a way to feed their families. Many of these households are in need of a larger unit in order to adequately house their families. The majority of the units in this development are family size, responding to the neighborhood and city's priorities for more family housing. Development will also provide residents with access to grocery stores, pharmacies, and other essential services without reliance on a car. I urge the BZA to approve this development as the planning board did unanimously. If Cambridge is to remain the economically and racially diverse city that it claims it to be, it's time to approve developments like these, which will help to address Cambridge's affordable housing crisis. That's the Cambridge way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Steve Bartage. Steve, can you unmute, please? Yep.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Steve Bartage, 55 Stern Street. My wife and I have lived at that address for 48 years. It's about a half mile from the corner of Walden and Mass Ave. And we've walked and driven by that corner, through that corner, thousands of times over that period of time. We applaud the developer in this project for his innovative effort to take some of his land abutting Walden and use it to widen Walden. While this in and of itself is not going to solve the traffic problems that are longstanding, I think it's going to help. It's clear that the city, left to its own inertia, won't do anything to solve those problems. We strongly support the proposal before the BZA. And as the BZA balances the competing interests and viewpoints at its hearing tonight and it's heard in its previous hearings, we urge the BZA to prioritize affordable units and prioritize the ability to house families who need affordable units in Cambridge, as many of the other previous speakers have noted. We don't like increasing density in any parts of Cambridge, but for this project, increasing density in this location on Mass Ave, where there is transportation, is the ideal location, as the Envision project noted. So with that, thank you for your time, and we strongly support the project.
Gregory Burnt.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. First, I agree 100% with Dennis Carlone. I'm also an architect. I live on Upland Road, and I'm a 30-year Cambridge resident. I agree completely with Margaret Reuters and need for smart, affordable housing development, which is always recognized best being low-rise like Jefferson Park. This high-rise project is designed as filling the small site as other tall buildings along Mass Ave don't. So it's not really comparable there. It's opposed by most all the neighbors, including next door. So the city should make sure the project's appropriate for Cambridge and welcome in the neighborhood. Frankly, I don't see future residents looking to raise a family in this proposed building, the housing actually being affordable for long or helping the homeless. And the construction will fill the entire site and involve over years of disruption. I'm also concerned as a Cambridge citizen that the pro forma of this project's not public. And if this project utilizes taxpayer funds, there should be full disclosure of project costs and who profits, etc., as all other neighboring cities such as Belmont require. And Cambridge should do that for this project rather than variances requested when the financing of the project is hidden from the public. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathleen Higgins.
Hi, my name is Kathy Higgins. I live at 35 Norfolk Street. I strongly support this 100% affordable proposal. Not having a home that is safe and stable and affordable is a foundational condition. It affects one's physical and emotional health. It's hard to do other things in life until this is secured. Without a home, things like chronic health conditions, addiction, mental health problems, employment, education are nearly impossible to pursue or consider. In other words, the basic human right to become all you can be is thwarted. Why is a 9-story building not perfectly fine next to buildings of lesser heights, whose interests are being prioritized if excuses like parking and design and open space are allowed to prevail against the value of families having a safe, stable community to call home if this proposal is allowed to go forward? I've lived in Cambridge 40 plus years, at one time in an expiring use building in Inman Square, 13 stories, situated in a neighborhood of mostly 3- and 4-story buildings. A diversity of building types makes a city. Inman Square Apartments was built in the 70s, and of course, neighbors organized to oppose it, saying, I quote from their literature, rezoning Inman Square to limit height of buildings, provide more open space, control density, and to prevent a raise in rents and increase in traffic. Does that sound familiar? Please, not approving this proposal would be shirking of the moral obligation to provide to those who are waiting, thousands of them, what many others take for granted and that which allows lives to flourish, a place to call home. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cyrus Doto.
My name is Cyrus Doko, 5 Walden Street. I'm a direct abutter. I live across the street. I'm also an architect and a trustee of our condo association here. I support the project. I also submitted a letter with unanimous support on behalf of our 4-story, 8-unit building. This is a good project. It makes the highest and best use of the site. It is well designed and meets an urgent need, as many have noted. Just one other comment I would like to make, which is that I just want to emphasize that the project team has done an excellent job listening to and addressing our concerns over the past 9 months, dating back to October of last year. They've demonstrated professional respect throughout the process, and from our perspective across the street, our dialogue has been productive and I think improves the design of the project. So thank you, and I urge you to approve this project.
Thank you.
Carolyn Fuller.
sorry, I hit the wrong button. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Carolyn Fuller, 12 Douglas Street, Cambridge. I am another Cambridge voter in support of this project. Short and sweet. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Martin Herskovich.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks for having a chance to speak. I live on Russell Street around the corner from this proposed building. Concern, we definitely need affordable housing. My biggest concern is for the experience of being in the neighborhood. An affordable building was built behind where I live 10 years ago. We were told there would be very little problem with parking, that it was affordable housing and transit oriented. Half of the people at least have cars in that building, and parking has become much more difficult on our street. Someone can say, oh, driving around for 5 minutes is an annoyance to find a space. There really is no space. To me, it's an irresponsible thing for the Board of Zoning Appeals or the city to approve this building, 48 units with no parking. Half of these people will have cars, or at least a third, and there really is no space available. It's to me just wrong for the city and will create more tension in the neighborhood if there are people looking for parking spaces and can't find it, and existing neighbors who live here now will be much more disgruntled. I think it's a bad design from that point of view. I don't see how the board has even let it go this far. I don't think it's an issue of density. Density is fine, but it feels like poor planning and not taken into consideration. Why have 600 people signed something saying they don't want this building? Part of it is, I'm sure, the size, et cetera. But I believe that parking is a big piece of it for many people. Please consider that in your decision making. Thank you.
Thank you.
Phone number ending 8311.
Hello, Heather Hoff, 13 Hurley Street. I want to respond to something that the board mentioned at the last meeting that I haven't heard anyone directly talk about, and that is precedent. I live in East Cambridge. Every time another tall building goes up and closer to our neighborhood, we're told, well, that's okay, so we can put another tall one. Now, I leave it to the board to decide whether this is the sort of precedent that they think is okay along here. Additionally, I wanted to pass on something I learned at a recent seminar held by CHAPA. I think everyone will agree that CHAPA is heavily in favor of affordable housing. This was about Chapter 40B. People told me that I shouldn't waste my time on this, was just going to get all the propaganda and this and that. And I will tell you that they were completely wrong. It was extremely innovative. And one of the messages that I took away was one that I want to pass on to you. They had a whole section design. And what they said was that you have to fit into the neighborhood. And that for good design, it is worth losing units because that matters. That matters to the experience of the people who live in the building and the people who are their neighbors. So again, I leave it to the board to decide whether this design does fit in. And finally, I have one question, and that is, what do we owe to the people who already live in affordable housing? Many of them, because the affordable housing that we're talking about here is for elderly and disabled people, aren't particularly mobile. And so they can't just go somewhere else if they want some fresh air and things like that. So what do we owe to them? Because they're also people who matter a whole lot to me, and I'm sure they matter to the board. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Heather.
Marcia Hams.
Hi, my name is Marcia Hams, and my wife and I have been lucky enough to own 195 Clifton Street for 30 years in North Cambridge, and my son and daughter-in-law rent nearby. I'm also a member of the parish in Cambridge, UU, which houses the widest shelter for youth experiencing homelessness. My family loves Cambridge, and we want others to have the opportunity to live here as well. We can't solve the problem of expanding inequities and issues such as homelessness if we don't sincerely commit to expanding affordable housing, not just talking about it, but approving projects like this one. This project is well designed and meets the goals of the Envision Cambridge process, which was a long and inclusive process, as others have mentioned. So I urge you to support this project.
Deborah Gustafson.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
My name is Deborah Gustafson, and I live on Walden Street, and I can see the proposed project out my window. I think, obviously low-income housing is politically and morally popular, and I'm also assuming that the developers aren't doing this project for all moral reasons. And I think that's really important to keep in mind, because I feel like there's been kind of a spin about how this is like all for the people. I'm not sure that that's the whole story. I've in the past worked in early intervention. So I've worked with young children and families doing home visits in every neighborhood in Cambridge. And I guess my question is this the best that Cambridge can offer low-income families? Yes, we need affordable housing. It's so obvious to everybody. I myself could benefit from it, but this project has one elevator. What happens with a family who has a wheelchair or, needs, if the elevator breaks down? There doesn't really seem to be a plan for that. There's no green space. There's no play space for children. There's no safe relationship to a safe street. Mass Avenue is not a safe street. Walden Street is actually an emergency evacuation route. So it's a very trafficked street. It's a serious consideration. Parents on the top floors of this building will never be able to monitor their children for safety. So it's not really I don't think, an appropriate design for families in many ways. And I just feel like we're continuing to build a kind of two-tiered Cambridge where people who have more affluence and live in other neighborhoods can maintain their green spaces and their livability, while there's this crowding with this planning or this approval, if you do approve it, where low-income families are not going to have the same quality of life and livability. And I do think that matters for child development and family growth. I think that low-income families, of course, need housing, but what kind of housing are we offering them? And it feels like a kind of lack of imagination. And people are always talking about these inequities.
That's 2 minutes.
Okay.
Derek Copon.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. My understanding of how the profits.
Oops. Sorry, Derek, please try again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my understanding of how the profit structure goes for these 40B projects is that the percent profit is fixed. And so the only way that a developer can increase their profit is by building the biggest building they could possibly build. And so I think most of us know it would be perfectly financially feasible to build a 5-story building or a 6-story building, even though most of the financials have not been made public. But it seems like the size and the total lack of scale of this building are totally driven by profit. I also want to second what many other people have said, that by the developer's own projections, there's going to be 50 additional cars in an area that has no parking, and I don't think families are going to want to live there. Personally, I did not have a car the majority of my adult life. Now that I have a child, I really can't imagine, moving a child around without a car. I'm not going to take him to the pediatrician sitting on the bus for an hour and a half. And the last thing I'll say is that, this developer has not really acted in good faith in his interactions with the neighborhood. This Sean Hope has made personal attacks against me and others in the neighborhood on neighborhood listservs and public forums. He's made racist attacks against city council members. He really conducts himself in a very reprehensible fashion. I'd like to point out that all of the city councilors that spoke in favor of this development earlier in public comment, all of them take money from this developer. As a person who's raising my family in this city, I think that is reprehensible, and that makes me sick. Thank you.
James All.
I'm James All. I live at 203 Pemberton Street in North Cambridge, and I strongly support this project. Cambridge policies and Massachusetts policies have been slowly changing to accommodate our desperate need for more affordable housing. Mass 40B was passed more than 50 years ago to prevent what always happens when someone proposes to build affordable housing. There's demands for one change after another, demands that the project sort of jump through one hoop after another, and that's often followed by one lawsuit after another. We're seeing the same here, with opponents tonight throwing in a last-minute claim that 40B simply shouldn't apply to this project. This board has previously recognized 40B and granted permits under it, even while Cambridge has been over the 10% goal, and there is no justification for reversing that policy now. We've heard a claim tonight that the greatest impact of this building will be on the people who live near it, and I believe that that is not true. If this building gets built, the greatest impact will accrue to the people who get to live in that building. And if this board should somehow not approve that building, the greatest impact will unfortunately fall on those people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill McAvaney.
Bill McAvaney, 12 Douglas Street. I have lived for 50 years, and I think I qualify as an elder now because I'll be turning 70 this year. I won't repeat what people have said about it, the project being just what Envision calls for. We have an acute housing shortage, and we need more affordable housing. We are not able to have enough affordable housing for our residents. We are continually losing our neighbors because they can no longer afford to live here. That's something that has directly impacted my quality of life, but far more severely, their quality of life. So I really urge you to approve this project with a full 48 units. Thank you.
Patricia Armstrong.
Okay, hello?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Yes, I have lived at Orchard Street for almost 40 years as a homeowner, a longtime Cambridge resident, and I want to express my strong opposition to this project simply because it is too big for the site. This site is, in my mind, one of the worst choices that could have been made just because it's inadequate. You're having to compromise the design of the building, the amenities for the residents there, the lack of park, lack of safety, lack of so many things. There has to be a better way. And I agree that with Dennis Carlone saying that the city should take the lead on this and not just take what a developer comes up with and says, oh, we got this spot. Let's do this, even though it can't be done really well. So I would say this is not the right place to do it. The city should take the lead on this and find a really good place where things can be, people would have more space, more room in their units, more safety. That's my recommendation. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Bernice Baresh.
I'm done.
Hello, my name is Bernice Baresh. I live at 140 Upland Road. And while I strongly support more affordable housing, I strongly oppose this particular project on this particular site. And the reason, one of the reasons for that is I don't think that this building will be habitable in a safe way. I'm struck that the BZA considers safety in its decisions about proposals that come before it. And here is a building that the developers have maxed out for money reasons. That's 9 and 5 stories high. We'll have 100 to 200 people in it at any given time, I imagine, with 48 apartments. And it has one elevator that somehow, maybe miraculously, will never go out of service. I don't know. And also the issue of the setbacks and the green space around the building are very serious. That's a very dangerous corner. In early March, I was almost hit by a car crossing Walden Street there while I was crossing with the walk sign. The lack of even minimal parking is always presents a hazard in its own. This building, I think, could work on Mass Avenue in another place, but it can't work on that particular corner. And I'm hoping that this will be taken very seriously. I think there's a double standard going on here, where there are people really saying it's good enough for people with low income. And I don't think it is by a long shot. Thank you very much.
Thank you for taking the time.
Mariette Murphy.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Chairman and the Zoning Board, for the opportunity to express my perspective. I am a pediatrician, adolescent medicine specialist, and opened the Teen Health Center at Cambridge Rindge and Latin. And I have testified before the City Council and the School Committee on many occasions. This, of course, is historical. I continue to care for poor, low-income families in Charlestown after I left Cambridge, but I have been a homeowner in Cambridge for the last 40 years. I have experienced, I have supported families in the face of privileged people who have envisioned many things for them, but have not cared for them. And that has created tremendous harm. And to listen to Cambridge, a city I love and have lived here, and my daughter and her husband are raising their children here, disparage community members who have dedicated their lives to caring for poor people. And, you know, I know it's low-income people in this setting, but my patients and their families
30 seconds.
Identify themselves in that way. So the safety that was just referenced in the previous caller, the early intervention person who has literally been in the households, all of us will be disparaged because we are caring for the low-income, poor, vulnerable, disenfranchised children and elderly. And for Cambridge to ignore that in the face of those who envision Cambridge but
2
exclude
minutes.
us,
Thank you.
who care for them.
Sarah Forrester.
Thank you. My name's Sarah Forrester, and I'm here to represent St. James Episcopal Church, which is located on the corner of Mass Ave and Beach Street. And we are in strong support of this project. We look forward to inviting the new families that are moving in to join us in worship in our historic sanctuary, and also to enroll in their children in our church school. Our food pantry will be returning to our new parish hall. We have an active Scouts troop that the parents can enroll their children in. And we have this open and accessible new garden space with a lovely lawn and shade, and other activities that we hope will help make their lives good ones. So thank you very much. We strongly support this project.
Suzanne Blair.
Thank you. Suzanne Blier. I'm an architectural historian who's written and taught on urban history, planning globally, and the future of the city. And I urge you to require that the developers follow the newly passed AHO ordinance requirements. This is now law for all AHO structures. The AHO criteria, which were addressed by developers such as these a year and a half ago or so, are still viable. What has changed? Really nothing. This project is coming to you through a 40B comprehensive permit. And it's what it would mean is setting precedent going forward that the AHO was not actually required. It will indeed increase land values, as all large projects do, and likely cause even more gentrification. But I would urge you to rethink this. Building on city land is far better. Indeed, wood, now we know, is better in terms of climate stabilization. I am concerned about one elevator and the lack of green space and moving toward a two-tiered system here in Cambridge. And yes, I urge everybody to read the Cambridge Community Foundation. It is one of the most shocking things that I've read. It's very painful truth. But we need to address this by building equity, stopping gentrification, which is continuing to promote homelessness, and to promote home ownership, now only 34%.
30 seconds.
And requests that the city bring to our universities, including mine, biotech, pharmatech, and infotech, to put together an area plan for the city. It's about law, process, precedent setting, and the viability of ordinances now in place. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The point on some, was it your phone?
Teresa Cardosi.
Hi, my name is Teresa Cardosi, and I live at 7 Woodville Wilson Court. I was born in Cambridge, so I grew up in Cambridge. And that site was always a fast food place. I think having a housing project there is the best uses of that area. So I'm asking that you support it. It's going to provide many families the opportunity to stay in Cambridge. 3 of the apartments are going to be fully accessible for people with disabilities, and one of those will be specifically designed for people with sensory disabilities. There'll be 2 drop-off spaces so traffic won't be blocked. The developer made design changes because they listened to the concerns and the needs of the community, and one of the apartments was lost because of the changes. But one of the changes that the developer made is they actually gave up a piece of their property so that Walden Street could be widened, because they listened to the concerns of the safety of the area, and they want people safe too. To give up a piece of the property to do that is not something that many developers would do. And all of these changes were done in the spirit of working with the community so that the project works for everybody. The planning board unanimously approved of the plan, so I'm asking you to give permission to build 2072 Mass Ave. The character of the community
30 seconds.
The character of the community will be strengthened by these new people, not changed. Thank you for the time.
Miranda Pierce.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Miranda Pierce, and I'm at 52 Clarendon Ave, off of Mass Ave, further towards Arlington. And I grew up in Cambridge, and I now raise my own family here. But we've seen a lot of families leave. 1 year, 3 families on our street left, to move to places where they could afford their more bedrooms for their kids. So I think this is really promising that this building has affordable 3-bedroom units. And I think there are other 9-story buildings on Mass Ave that are not so good looking, but I think you'll find like Shea Road and Mass Ave, they don't ruin Shea Road. They somehow, you just kind of don't notice them. You don't look up. But more importantly than how it looks is we are facing a climate crisis. And I think building dense housing near transportation just like this is the very least we can do. So I'm all for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Grace Nauman.
I'm a neighbor. I live in Somerville at 44 Cherry Street, but I'm about a half mile away from the proposed site. And I have, during the pandemic for a little bit of time, did commute through that Walden Street entrance and intersection. And I do just want to register my strong support for this project. I also want to agree with the last speaker that I think it's actually a very attractive building. It looks a little bit more in the range of what you would typically see sort of marketed towards, the biotech people coming in, drawing up the cost of housing. The rooftop garden looks very pleasant. I think it looks like a very livable, lovely place. And also as someone who has chosen to do most of my commuting by transit, the location right in front of a bus stop, I think, will be a big boon to the people who live there. It's having lived right in front of a bus stop before, it's an incredible amount of convenience, and in my experience, makes transit a lot more accessible. Thank you for your time.
Jonathan Behrens.
Hi, Jonathan Behrens, 115 Hampshire Street. I support affordable housing. And since that somehow isn't enough to guess my views on this project, I'll be explicit. I support 2072 Mass Ave. I'm relatively new to Cambridge politics, so I wanted to call out an observation about this meeting that perhaps is normal for the rest of you, but it's really taken me by surprise. I'm amazed by the number of residents who claim to be in favor of affordable housing, yet who have failed to list even a single affordable housing project that they actually supported. Not one person has named any building that they showed up to support while it was being designed. And many of these same folks who opposed the AHO, and in one case even voted against it, now expect me to believe that they support affordable housing? Yeah, right. I might not know everything about local land use policies, but I wasn't born yesterday. I hope that the BZA will do better. Prove that you support affordable housing with your actions, not just with empty words. Thank you.
Charles Posner.
How many more?
10.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. My name's Charlie Posner. I live on 156 Raymond Street, about a quarter mile from the proposed development. I'd like to say 2 things. First, I want to say hello to my long ago Little League coach and current member of the board, Brendan Sullivan. Hi, Coach. I'll never forget being at the old VFW banquet hall on Huron Ave and being absolutely shocked when Coach named me MVP of the league. It was a life goal at 12. 2, I want to speak in full support of the proposed development. This is the first time I've spoken at a public hearing like this and felt moved to speak. I was born and raised in Porter Square. One of the biggest reasons I chose to move back to live here and now have a child here, the neighborhood is in this neighborhood is its unique, funky, diverse community that's so committed to its values. An example of this is the energy many of us experienced during the Black Lives Matter protests last summer. To me, the developers have been very thoughtful about the design and frankly, even more thoughtful about addressing the abutters' concern in the redesigns. In many ways, Cambridge has transformed over the years, but what I'm most concerned about is keeping what makes it unique. I have to say a board decision to not approve the current proposal would kind of weaken my faith in Cambridge being true to its values. In my view, it would push us toward other, quote, elite cities that are symbolically progressive but operationally conservative. Approving this proposal isn't really sad precedent. It's just a reasonable choice that helps keep Cambridge special and accessible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Andy Tarsi.
Thank you. You can hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. I'm glad to be here to speak in favor of this development. Thank you to the chair and the board for recognizing so many of us tonight. I'm a resident with my family of 77 New Street. For the last 11 years had been over in the Riverside, Cambridgeport area on Howard Street. And I want to say comments in a few categories real quick. Number one, the character of the developer, Mr. Hope. To me, the idea that Cambridge would have its own son, no less a black man in a society that is putting so many things in the way of people of color to stay in Cambridge and be a creative thought developer. Thumbs up. Awesome. Something we need to embrace and encourage and create opportunity, wealth, and successful entrepreneurs. And here's one who's chosen affordable housing to focus on, could be making a living doing almost anything. Number two, diversity, building on that. I'm one of the consultants that recently filed a report we've been working on for 2-3 years for the city of Cambridge about how to increase diversity and high promotion for the city. It's going to make a lot of us smarter about how to build the Cambridge that people keep talking about. And affordable housing and this kind of project, whether it's perfect for you or not, is a part of that solution to who can live here,
30
and
seconds.
who can work here, and part of it. Number three, transit. Transit-based dense housing, it doesn't have the same amenities that all of these long-term homeowners with their lawns on the side streets have had. It's not supposed to. We have a housing crisis. This is nice housing, and it's in an eclectic neighborhood, and it solves a whole bunch of problems for us. I think it's exciting. We're not here to relitigate the 40B model. That's part of our system.
2 minutes.
And
Thank you.
I'm in favor.
Phone number ending 1363.
Hello.
Hi,
Can
go
you hear
ahead.
me?
Yep.
Okay, my name's James Williamson. I live at 1000 Jackson Place in Jefferson Park. I want to first say that right now, the Porter Square Neighborhood Association are having a meeting, and they're discussing the now mandatory introduction of separated bike lanes between Harvard Square and Dudley Street, way up in North Cambridge. So all are they going to go back? Are the city staff going to go back and take another look at their parking study to determine what the removal of parking spaces along Mass Ave to make way for the separated bike lanes is, what the impact that's going to be on the numbers that they came up with on parking? That should be a requirement. 3 parking spaces, I think, is ridiculous. People talk about public transit. Almost all of them never take it. I take it every day. How many people know that that there actually have been service reductions imposed for the 77 bus, which is the main bus that serves this area? What about Porter Square? How many people actually have ever been to the Porter Square station and know the current condition of it? So, I just don't buy the talk about public transit. It bothers me that this was bought with $3.8 million, a forgivable loan. The Affordable Housing Trust put up the money 2.5 years ago. To me, this is the city administration and city bodies spending our money to do stuff that ends up being against us. I think we can have affordable housing without having it be something that pisses everybody
30
off
seconds.
and creates this kind of tension in the community. Why? Because people are insisting on too much. At the very first community meeting, I went to that meeting prepared to see like a 7-story building. I thought, hey, a little bit of density, a little bit of height on Mass Ave. I was shocked at what they proposed, really shocked. And I'm shocked that they're not willing to accommodate the people who live next door in Russell Apartments. They're treating the people they supposedly are doing this for as second-class citizens. Pack them and stack them. That's what they're going to do
2
at Jefferson
minutes.
Park.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you, James.
Ann Ferrero.
Hi, my name is Ann Farrow. I live at 35 Walden Street. I'm a lifelong resident in Cambridge. I've lived in this neighborhood for 60 years. And I first want to say I'm not opposed to affordable housing, but I am opposed to this design. Anyone who spoke tonight who thinks it's a 5-minute inconvenience should try driving down Walden Street during rush hour. Anyone who's comparing it to the building at 2130 Mass Ave should know that behind the building, which also has a setback, there's an extensive parking lot, and that this Cogswell Ave is so less traveled in comparison to Walden Street. It's also a one-way during peak commute hours. Anyone who says that we're for affordable and can't cite any other building, would like to cite Capstone's building at Port Landing, which allows for 1 parking space permit as well as for bicycles. So it's my opinion that this building can be great, but they need to add parking for the homes, and also they need to keep the exit on Walden Street, because 49 families exiting and entering on that right turn lane on Walden Street will be a nightmare, and it's already a bad situation. I also lastly would like to remind you that an 11-year-old girl, Jamisa Doughton, was killed at that corner
30 seconds.
by a truck who claimed that did not see her over that 1-story building. So just put that into perspective, what that means in terms of a 9-story building going up as far as safety of the people who have the right of way. The biggest impact is the parking here. And it's not 5 minutes of inconvenience. Try going around the block. There's times where I've come pre-pandemic home and it takes
2
me
minutes.
30.
Thank you. Ariel Stanford.
Hi, thank you. This is Ariel Stanford. I am a psychiatrist. I live at 12 Sycamore Street, about around the corner from this proposed project. I am in support of affordable housing. I lived in it in New York City, where I grew up in Queens. We did not have the level of traffic congestion nor parking difficulties that Walden Street has near the intersection at Massachusetts Avenue. It is disgraceful that you can put up 48 apartments and think that green space on the roof is sufficient or even safe or convenient for children to be playing on. I don't understand why the back building needs to even be there. I'm okay with that 9-story building. Take out that 5-story building in the back and put in green space, just like the building has next door. And you can put parking underground for people who live there. It's unacceptable. People drive to work, especially if you live outside of the city. Cambridge does not have the transit system that New York City has, and it is not safe on that corner. And also, currently, that intersection has 3 lanes at the light. So making 1 lane longer is not going to improve the congestion or the of individuals crossing at Mass Ave or Walden Street.
30 seconds.
So Again, I support low-income housing, but I do not think this project is well thought out or considerate of the neighborhood congestion, neighborhood parking, and the same thing for the people who would live in that very building. Thank you.
Mary Bain Campbell.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak. I'm a strong supporter of the building at 2072. I ill, so I missed a lot of the beginning of this meeting. So I've been to the previous zoning board meeting and some community meetings. I don't know exactly what everyone said today, but I will say that as a person who has lived in buildings in Manhattan, much, much larger than this one with only one elevator, I never felt endangered, nor did I know anyone who felt endangered in their buildings. And I really am especially surprised to hear former New Yorkers speak about the danger of that. I also am a person who, contrary to some people's beliefs, do indeed by public transportation. I've lived in Cambridge most of my adult life, and I commute most of the time either by commuter train or bus or T. Sometimes I have to commute for several months at a time by car because I have a condition that involves a lot of orthopedic surgery. And when I do, I commute on Walden Street. It's annoying, like commuting on any other street in the city. And I've lived in many cities, and I've commuted in them. I don't understand the level of panic that I hear, but I do understand that this is a nice looking
30
building
seconds.
for people who need homes. And they are the kind of people who, ever since I moved here, have been driven out of Cambridge, making it less diverse and less interesting and less welcoming and less of a town I can be proud of and love living in all the time. So I really welcome the inhabitants of this building back, and I think they're lucky to live in a nice building and use the T.
Thanks. Patrick Sweeney.
Hi, my name is Patrick Sweeney. I'm a 26-year-old lifelong Cambridge resident. Time and time again, I've heard stories of friends and others who have had to move out due to the city's rising costs. These are people who have given so much to the community and are great assets. I think this is a great location, being near public transportation, Baldwin, Peabody, and the Gately Youth Center. I'm in full support of this project. Thank you.
Craig Nicholson.
Hello, I'm Craig Nicholson. I work for Justice Start. We're a nonprofit affordable housing developer. I wanted to clarify 2 points. Primarily, one is that the affordable housing overlay was never designed to be the default standard of what an affordable housing project could look like. It is a mechanism for us to compete with for-profit developers and doing exactly what we can build on a site by right. Secondly, in regards to education, yes, there's gentrification happening in Cambridge. There is not gentrification happening when you take a fast food, fast, fresh restaurant and replace it with housing. You are not displacing low income or existing income residents with housing. You are creating housing for people that don't have an opportunity at that site. For that, I am fully in support of 2072 Mass Ave. Thank you.
Seymour Kellerman.
Yes, thank you. I live at 21 Cogswell Avenue, Seymour Kellerman. It's a block or so away from the project. I've lived here for 30 years. I know that the currently at 2072, that's not a fast food restaurant for the last 11 years. It's actually a full service Indian restaurant, and I can assure you the service is not fast. I oppose this project very strongly. First, because of the safety concerns that many people have mentioned. This is already a dangerous intersection. You're not going to make it any safer by widening the street a little and adding 200 people there. And second, because of the Russell Street, the Russell apartments, which are 4 feet away and which contain already affordable housing people and quite a diverse section. And in fact, this is already a diverse neighborhood. This idea that you're going to make it more diverse is nonsense. And so for those reasons, mainly, I am opposed to this project. Thank you.
Lisa McManus.
Hi, I'm Lisa McManus. I live at 17 Creighton Street, pretty much right behind where this project would go, 1 block over from Walden. I just had a few comments. I mean, I agree with a lot of the people who are speaking already, so I'm not going to repeat that. But one is that this project is really not about affordable housing. It's really about ensuring tax breaks to the rich investors who are backing the project. That's why they will not reduce the size or seriously consider the concerns of abutters and people who do believe that this building is way out of scale. They did not listen to the community. I went to all those community meetings and it was really set up as a one-way street. They made their presentation, they took questions offline, and people were not able to have a dialogue. Really no movement. The other thing that really concerns me is that they're citing the 9-story building toward Arley, a block down. That building is set back, has trees and bushes in front of it. It's not a pretty building. Thank goodness it has those trees there. But citing that as a precedent is telling me that they're citing this as a precedent. This building will be cited as a precedent in the future, and we'll have oversized buildings that are not appropriate for the site. We don't need to solve the entire affordable housing crisis on this corner. The rules that the city set out suggesting an appropriate size and setbacks for housing built for affordability really should be followed, and I think that's what the BZA should be thinking about. What precedent are we setting, and really who are we doing this for? It's just as much for these developers. And for affordable housing, it sounds great. It's
30
making
seconds.
everyone feel very guilty if they oppose this building in any way. I am not opposed to affordable housing. I just think appropriate building here and more elsewhere in the city make it more appealing to people in the neighborhood, and this will go through much more quickly, much more easily at other sites in the city if it fits the location. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it. Yep.
I believe that's all the public public testimony we're going to have. No one else seems to want to appear. So I will close public testimony. And now I think we turn to the fun part of the night for this board, and that is what to do with the application. I'm going to suggest that I will make a motion to approve. In part, the motion is very long for well, not very long, but longer than usual for a comprehensive permit case. And also because, at least I believe, that if the project is to be approved, and that remains to be seen, that there are need for a number of conditions that will deal with some of the, should we say, shortcomings of what is being proposed. After that, we can then have a discussion, make suggested amendments if necessary to the motion, and then we can take a vote. So with that, unless other members of the board feel that's not the way to go, and hearing nothing, I will start. The chair moves that we make the following findings with regard to the comprehensive permit that's being sought. First, with regard to jurisdictional requirement, the petitioner has represented that it is a 501c3 nonprofit charitable corporation. For some reason, the copy of the charter of the corporation has not been filed. But we have a representation, and that's sufficient, I think, for the motion. On the basis of the representation, we find that the petitioner is an eligible applicant under Chapter 40B because of its nonprofit status.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
This is Bruce Philman from Houston Peabody on behalf of the applicant. We are actually, all of the documentation submitted clearly states that we are submitting this application as a limited dividend organization, not as a nonprofit.
I'm sorry?
It's the attorney, their attorney.
One of the requirements, well, as I said, it was represented in the filing by the petitioner that it is a 501(c) nonprofit charitable corporation. Is that not true?
No, the applicant is a limited dividend organization. There are options under the regulations with respect to how the applicants can satisfy this first jurisdictional requirement.
And does that status enable the petitioner, whoever it may be, to obtain a comprehensive permit?
Absolutely, under.
Okay, then the motion will be modified to reflect the actual nature of the applicant's status, despite the fact that it was represented differently when the application was filed.
We apologize for any misunderstanding, but under 760 CMR 5604 1A, the applicant can be one of three types of entities: a public agency, which we are not, a nonprofit organization, which we are not, or a limited end organization, which we are.
Thank you. Moving on.
Thank you for your time.
With regard to a fundable project, the petitioner has forwarded to this board a site approval letter from the Department of Housing and Community Development stating that the petitioner's application for a project eligibility determination for the project has been approved. And last, petitioner has represented to this board and presented evidence that it has control of the site by means of a 99-year lease with a related entity. Based on these foregoing findings and subject to the satisfaction of the condition we are imposing, that's to come, the board finds that the petitioner has met all of the jurisdictional requirements. Moving on to findings, the petitioner has submitted to this board an application for a comprehensive permit, including 1, preliminary site development plans showing the locations and materials of proposed building streets, drives, park areas, walks, and paved areas, and open areas such that there may be within the site. 2, information concerning the existing conditions of the site and surroundings. 3, preliminary scaled architectural drawings, including typical floor plans and sections. 4, a list of required exceptions to local required regulations. Moving on, the applicant has submitted evidence concerning the continued need for affordable housing in the Cambridge and in the surrounding region. On the basis of that evidence and the board's knowledge of housing in the city of Cambridge, the board finds that there continues to be a regional need for affordable housing and a substantial unmet need for affordable housing in the city of Cambridge. 3, in reviewing the project and subject to compliance with the conditions hereinafter imposed, the board has not identified any significant health, safety, environmental, design, open space, and no adverse impact on storm drainage, traffic, engineering, planning matters that would support denial of the project or outweigh the local or regional housing need. 4, review of the project and subject to compliance with the conditions hereinafter imposed, the board has determined that the petitioner has taken reasonable measures to ensure the project's compatibility with abutting properties and the surrounding neighborhood, including neighboring commercial and residential uses. And let me interrupt here and remind, this is not a finding. This is the finding that we will, if we vote in favor, this will be part of the vote and the findings that we make. The board, and 5, the board has determined that the relief from the specific requirements of local restrictions and regulations requested by the petitioner is necessary in the circumstance to ensure the creation of affordable housing and to allow the construction of the project in compliance with the conditions hereinafter imposed. So finally, based on these determinations and findings, the board finds that the development meets the requirements for a comprehensive permit under Chapter 40B, and that such a permit shall be granted to the petitioner subject to compliance with the following conditions. 1, that final detailed construction plans must be submitted to the building inspector to ensure that the final plans are consistent with the preliminary plans submitted by the petitioner, the first page of which has been initialed by the chair. 2, that in no event shall any of the dwelling units proposed to be erected on the site ever be used for any purpose other than to provide affordable housing as proposed by the petitioner. 3, that the widening of Walden Street at the intersection with Massachusetts Avenue, as proposed by the petitioner in its December 7 filing with the board, shall be open for vehicular traffic prior to the issuance of the project's final certificate of occupancy. The petitioner shall record a pedestrian easement along Walden Street in favor of the city of Cambridge, the location of which is generally as indicated on C-1 proposed easement plan dated November 10, 2020 by Niche Engineering. This easement shall be approved by the Cambridge DPW staff, which approval shall not be unreasonably withheld, conditioned, or delayed. 4, that the petitioner and his successors in interest with regard to the project shall at all times comply with the transport demand management measures from time to time in effect, referred to in a November 20, 2020 memorandum from Traffic, Parking, and Transportation addressed to the Cambridge Planning Board and the Board of Zoning Appeals. 5, that the petitioner and its immediate and remote successors with regard to the ownership and/or operation of the project shall use commercially reasonable best efforts at all times to avoid or minimize any adverse effects upon the occupants of the adjoining Russell Senior Citizen Housing at 2050 Massachusetts Avenue. 6, that the structures at the structure's 5th floor roof, a landscape terrace will be maintained that safely accommodates raised gardens and native plantings. Terrace shall be in place at or before the issuance of the project's final certificate of occupancy. This terrace shall also be designed and maintained to safely accommodate an open children's play area. The project's management shall at all times take all reasonable efforts to protect and preserve the privacy and tranquility of neighboring properties to the extent that may be affected by the use of the 5th floor roof. And last, 8, the structure's rooftop shall not be available to the building's tenants or their guests for recreational, viewing, or storage purposes. This restriction shall not apply to the use of the 5th floor roof. That is the motion. Any comments on the motion? Or if not, we can then move on to a discussion person by person as to whether he or she approves the motion.
This is Jim Monteverdi. I have a comment.
Sure.
Mr. Chair. So would you consider adding another condition?
By all means, This is not, I don't have the revealed wisdom here, of course. What are you proposing, Jim?
It's to reduce the height.
Oh, I don't know if that's a condition. I think it's the condition.
I'm reading from the information we were sent this afternoon by the city solicitor.
Yes.
Basically says the board may dispose of the application in the following manner: approve, deny, or approve with conditions with respect to height, site, plan, size, shape of building, etc.
I'm open for a limited condition regarding height. We have to decide what, but I'm not. Well, what are you proposing?
In compliance with the overlay district.
So, okay, something I was going to mention later. Fine. So the further condition is that the height of the building shall be reduced so that it complies with the affordable housing overlay provisions of our city.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
could we vote up and down on your preliminary?
You mean you want to take a second to add this condition or not?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
If that's okay with Jim, that's okay with me.
Fine. That's fine.
Okay? All right, so we'll take a preliminary vote as to the other conditions, and then I'll add a condition regarding affordable housing overlay, and then we'll take a separate vote on that. So, on the conditions that I've read, there we are. Now, okay, they've been proposed. I'm not going to take a vote yet. I'm a little bit puzzled how to do this, but Laura, I know what you want to do, but I think we can do it. Let's take a vote on the motion that I have made, and then we'll have a second motion to amend the previous motion to add Jim's condition. Brendan.
Brendan Sullivan, I would not support your motion.
Do not support the motion. Okay. Jim?
I would support your motion with the conditions that I'm trying to offer.
Okay.
I'm
sorry, Andrew. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Andrew?
No, it was.
Oh, Laura, I'm sorry.
I think what you're saying, Jim, is that you do not support his motion.
That's right. That's exactly what he said.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Not sorry. Thank you.
Okay. Now, Laura, since you have the phone, go ahead.
I support your motion.
Okay. Andrea?
I do not support your motion, but I would support it with Mr. Monteverde's amendment.
I do not. Okay. And the chair does not vote in support of the motion either. So the motion is not carried. Well, I guess it's unusual. I'm going to reiterate the motion, add Jim's condition, and we'll take a second vote to see whether that passes muster. And I think we've already made so the next motion I'm going to propose is the one that was just rejected, but as modified to include the condition regarding the height of the building in relation or in compliance with the affordable housing overlay. Brendan? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Laura.
Before we start, can we understand a little bit of the implications of an 8-story, since the implications were never presented as part of?
I'm sorry, I did just catch that. Give you one more time.
I'm just asking is before we actually vote, can we understand the implications of the conditions on the applicant?
Surely. Obviously, the basic impact is going to reduce the height of the building. By how much? I'm not that.
It reduces the number of units as well.
Correct.
To be sure. I don't know if anybody.
Perhaps can we have the applicant just explain any implications of the change?
I'll ask the applicant if they wish to speak to address Laura's question.
Sure. It's unfortunate, but I think we represented to try to make it clear that an overlay project was not financially feasible, so that a condition reduce the height to 6 stories would do such. Now, the only distinction I make is that an overlay project is more than height. an overlay project is height, but it's also setbacks. And it's the height plus the setbacks that makes the project of 30 units financially unfeasible. The board is saying that the height is the overlay height, which would be 6 stories, but is not requiring other elements of the overlay. We would have to see that. But I would say that that condition would be putting the project in significant jeopardy. And I think we made that clear at the outset.
Okay.
This is Brendan Sullivan. Sean, you're really asking for 17 exceptions to the zoning ordinance, which is quite a bit. I would be supportive of the affordable housing project if you complied with the affordable housing overlay standards and formula regarding height. I would allow the exemption for parking. The parking as presented would be okay. I would also allow for your exemptions from the setback requirements. So I think it may be in line with what Jim is saying, is that the only modification that we would like to see from the plan would be a reduction in the height to the standard in the formula as contained in the affordable housing overlay ordinance. Is that correct, Jim?
That's correct.
Okay. So that would be the only one. The other set-asides that you're asking for, or the other exemptions from the ordinance, reluctantly, but I would be okay with those if the size of the building was reduced to the standard and the formula as contained and outlined in the affordable housing overlay ordinance.
Okay. That will, of course, is going to require new plans from the petitioner, assuming he wishes it wishes to go forward with this. But I don't think we can just simply say we approve this, provided that the height is reduced to the affordable housing overlay. For example, what's going to happen to the terrace in the back? It's just the same? I don't know. I don't know what the petitioner would have in mind.
Brendan Sullivan, it may require a redesign, obviously, and it may induce the developer just to say that they're not interested in proceeding. I don't know that. Or maybe you just need to step back from tonight, Sean, and decide what your option would be, or not.
I think a third scenario could be that you're placing a condition that makes the project unfinancially feasible. And so that is a reality that we are teetering on. So I don't think it's that we don't want to proceed. I don't think it's that we want to negotiate. There is a part where these projects have to pencil. You know well as I do, construction costs are exorbitantly high right now, close to 40% higher. So this is not about us not wanting to proceed. This is not about us wanting to have a certain building versus other buildings. You put a condition that we have represented. And what I don't know for sure is if we are allowed to keep the normal setbacks and not have to apply the overlay setbacks, there could be a project. But I would say that we are very close to not having a project, and I don't want to misspeak. But when we made our representations about the fixed costs, those are real, those are accurate. We talked to Callahan Construction days before this meeting to get a real grasp on what it would mean to do an overlay size project as opposed to some version of what we were looking for. But to the board makes a decision, I don't, we have a team, but I don't want to say that we wouldn't want to move forward. But frankly, you can make a decision on a building that could never be built.
The overlay ordinance, was passed back in October of 2020. It's only 8 months old, and yet the proposal that you brought before us totally renders, and again, that's the city council document. That's the one that they gave to us. That's the one they passed back in October. It renders that document totally irrelevant.
Mr. Sullivan, I thought we made this clear last time. The idea that the overlay was supposed to be a design guide, not accurate. You had 3 members who voted for that. They've all said the same thing. So we purchased the property before the overlay. The overlay we were already in process with CDD. This is not Sean and Jason in a hole. We went to the planners of the city. If the planners of the city wanted us to have only an overlay project, you would never hear about this project, would not get off the ground. This is not a design guideline. That is a distortion of the overlay. It is another tool.
The overlay ordinance went on for 33 pages, and the project that is before us could actually be summed up in one sentence, not 33 pages, if that is the consensus of the city council, is that any qualifying 40B project shall be allowed anywhere, anytime, in any size, in any form. Because that's basically what is above us, that a building that is supposed to be 6 stories, what's the limit, 50 feet, 55 feet, or something like that, is now coming before us at 102 feet. The FAR is 6.38. It's just, anyhow, I've said enough.
I thought we established that the overlay wasn't a design guideline, but you continue to use it as such. If you don't like the height, you don't like the height, but it's not fair of you to use the overlay as intended.
The wording,
the affordable housing, and you're using it now as a glass ceiling, and that's inaccurate.
Sean,
not what was
the
intended.
wording
And
of
I
the...
said at the first hearing, I expected that you would go to CDD and the city councilors and ask them what the intention was. But instead, you've decided to continue to use it as such. And that is not accurate.
Their intention was the document before us.
That was never the intention.
Their intention is the document before us. It is a set of...
No, it wasn't. And you
language.
You have access to the full city council. That's accurate. That is not accurate. I thought you would check on that.
The language before us, it is a set of modified development standards set forth in section 11.207 of this zoning ordinance intended to allow incremental increases in density, limited increases in height, and relaxation of certain other zoning limitations for residential developments in which all units are made permanent. That's their language, that's their intent.
So you have an option for an overlay project, and you have an option for a comprehensive permit. You don't have to do an overlay project. An overlay project does not have an appealable permit. You have a choice. If we wanted to not have an appealable permit, we could have done a 6-story building. We have an appealable permit. We are taking risks. We are bound to mice, and that is a separate option. There are certain sites that will never be fundable under an affordable overlay project. It wasn't meant to cut 40Bs out on his legs, but it sounds like posing is you can never have a 40B project because somehow the overlay now is a cap on all development. So there's setbacks on all development. That's just not accurate. And I really feel like it's been used by the opponents to stop projects when it was actually intended to do the opposite. And I really think it's a shame. If you don't want to vote for 9 stories, full on, I accept it. The board's within its authority. But I said it at the first hearing, I thought you would check my words. The overlay was not intended to use how you use it. If you think 6 stories is fine, fine. Own that, but don't use the overlay. That is not how it was intended. It was not.
If I may, I think we need to change the focus of the discussion. What Jim Monteverde's motion is he wants to reduce height of the building. He's using the overlay district as a height that he would accept. But the point is, he's not, unless they're otherwise, he is not in favor of voting in favor of a 9-story building. So, if we do it, we vote, assuming we do, to grant the comprehensive permit on the condition that the building be no higher than 6 stories, the number of stories that are permitted by the Affordable Overlay District. That's just a point of reference. It's not incorporating the informal affordable housing reference into the ordinance. So the real question is, will you go forward with a building? You want to have us vote on a building that will not be, assuming the vote passes, 9 stories high?
6 stories, 6.
Mr.
Yes.
I think when Jim first made his suggestion, maybe I heard wrong. I thought he was saying 8 stories. Am I wrong, Jim?
Well, I was trying to see what the discussion might be and where others felt comfortable. It's less than 9. I'm not sure if at the moment. I actually was just wanted to call up the overlay district so I could read the height specifically, because I remember seeing it buried in some of the correspondence. If it's a simple one, I was looking for a simple guideline as opposed to just throwing numbers out to negotiate a height. But 8 certainly better than 9. 7's better than 8. I don't see 6 in my heart.
excuse my passion. Again, if the board in its wisdom thought a lower height was appropriate, like I said at the very first hearing, we were open to that. I categorically feel distorting the overlay to somehow cap this project is something that I have a hard time accepting. But if the board in its wisdom thought that not 9 stories, but there was another height that was appropriate, that would be financially viable, we're here to build affordable housing. We're not here to have some monument height. And we have represented what we believe is not financially feasible. And if the board in its wisdom can come up with a building program that they feel is acceptable, we can finance it and we can build that. I can't speak for my full team, but that's why we're here. And that's why we spent the last year in the neighborhoods trying to figure out some way to maximize this opportunity for the benefit of building family-friendly affordable housing.
Okay.
It seems to me we're I'm sorry, go ahead, Jim.
No, this is Jim Monteverdi.
Yeah.
The issue I wanted to raise was height.
Yes.
And really wishing to reduce the height and discussion between the board members to see what comfort level may be. And if I use the affordable housing overlay, it's really just looking for another guideline that, as opposed to us arbitrarily setting our own standard. So that's something that was defensible. But I'm happy. Again, the issue is height in my mind.
But the issue is height. But whenever you reduce height, you're also numbers. So
yeah, I understand.
You cannot just simply say we're reducing height to some height. It's how many units are you going to be reducing as well.
Understood. I understand.
Where we are now is that the board wants the height to be reduced, and the petitioner is saying it's not possible because it will make the project not financeable or not economic. That's where we are.
Just
if we
clarifying,
can't reach a compromise, and we don't have to, then there's nothing to vote on.
I just want to clarify, Mr. Chair, what I said, the overlay height is not financially feasible. We researched it, and it's the height plus the setbacks. So, but there is, I'm not saying that we present a 8-story building, full on. It was an 8-story flat building. And because we worked with an abutter, we went up to 9 and dropped it to 6 in the back. But we had an 8-story building that was financially feasible. We thought that was worse for the neighborhood because there wasn't a step down. So, I mean, we did propose a plan less than 9 stories that we felt was financially feasible.
Well, we're still where I said we were before. We're not, the height that you have on your plans does not appear to be acceptable to this board. It's too high. So, Ms. Jim was trying to, as I said, I'll just repeat it, trying to have a frame of reference to what might be a good height for the building. You're saying, and that's not the case. I don't want to modify the height of the building. We can take a vote, but I got a feeling the vote's not going to be, you're not going to get your comprehensive permit.
Am I allowed to chime in here for a second?
I'm sorry?
So, mind if I chime in for 1 second?
Go ahead.
Okay, so we serve the Department of Housing and Community Development. We serve the Affordable Housing Trust. Okay, our fees are fixed. They're calculated. You can go online and see how they're calculated. Okay, it's the same fee as the nonprofit gets. There are limits, cost limits, to these things. It's not like if there were no cost limits, I would sit here and tell you, great, let's do a 6-story building. No problem. But we have to fill out 5-inch applications that I know are going to get denied by the state because they're going to say your costs are too high. And I just want to clarify, everything I told you guys with regard to the cost and the fixed costs and the 6-story versus the 9-story, that was all true. I wasn't making stuff up. Just what people may have said tonight. I actually take a lot of pride in my ethics and my morals, and I would never misrepresent numbers to a public board or to for that matter. I can't sit here and tell you a 6-story AHO project is going to work for us, even if you overwork, because I know it's not. I know the state's going to reject it, and I know the state's going to reject it. The Affordable Housing Trust is going to reject it. I don't know what to say. It's we are contained by these cost limitations, and it's terrible that costs are so high, right? Bank of America just came out with a study that said that steel is tripling in cost, and it's potentially going to crush the economy. You know, you can't buy drywall. If you literally went to a drywall contractor right now, you wouldn't be able to buy it or how much you paid it. So like, we're doing our best here with the cards that have been dealt with us, with all these different agencies that are sitting over us. We're not like a private firm that just taps into our private equity firm and says, give us another $3 million. You know?
Jason?
Yeah.
Hi, how much money are you guys making project?
Mr. Chair, did we open this to public comment?
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I couldn't resist. Sorry.
No, yeah,
Sorry, Jim.
it's okay.
Well, I still think we are where I said we were before. We have a disagreement as to the height of the building. Jim's efforts to take another frame of reference proved not to be successful.
Well,
But
maybe I can offer, I don't mean to interrupt you. Maybe I can offer, so the basement is really expensive. It is the number one driver of cost project. Now, we're not sure if we can, I've been texting with my architect, and Jason Forney, maybe he can weigh in since he's on the call, right? He's on the thing here, right? Because can you build and this is going to obviously require us to submit all new plans, right? But can you build a slab on grade building, right? Meaning no basement at this location? There's some very challenging soil conditions. So, you know, if we can get rid of the basement, but then that gets rid of a lot of the bike parking, which we know is a huge issue. So, Jason, I don't know, you know.
I think that's mostly accurate, Jason. The site requires that we excavate about 7 feet, which is a lot of cost. And by then you know, those are just other costs that would go into making it expensive. And then moving the things that are in the basement, like the bicycle king, the emergency generator, the mechanical equipment, would displace the parking in the retail or push it further up into the building, displacing more apartments.
Well, again, one more time. The problem is the height of the building. Frankly, if we ever got to the point of voting up or down, I was planning, though I've never done this before, I was planning to vote no, not to grant you a comprehensive permit, mainly because of the height of the building, other factors that relate to it, but that's it. And so here we are, and I think what Jim Monteverde is saying, and maybe other members will say as well, the building will not be approved if it's going to be 9 stories high. And if you can't finance the building unless it's 9 stories high, it's the wrong building for the site. You know, it's not a given that you have to be able to do this. You've got to do it in a way that comports with the values, the city's general requirements, and the views of this board. That's where we are. To start with, the idea is we can't because we can't afford it. Well, that's the way the cookie crumbles, frankly. You can't afford it, then you don't do this project, or you redesign the building.
Mr. Chair, would the board consider an 8-story building? You just said.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Would the board consider an 8-story building? We presented an 8-story building when it wasn't 9 stories; it was a full 8 stories.
With the step down in the back still or not?
We presented a first 8-story full building. Jason,
meaning no step down in the back.
So we presented a full 8 stories. I wanted to ask our design team and Jason. We had looked at, and sorry to do this on the fly, we had looked at an 8-6 building, right? 8 stories with 6 in the back.
I'm sorry. Can I ask everybody a favor? Normally when we're in these hearings together, like the team can like huddle up together and then come back. Considering the amount of time that everybody here is dedicated, both yourselves as well as the folks that have given testimony, and can maybe our team just have a conference for a few minutes to talk about this?
For a few, I would prefer, because if we're talking potentially redesigned structure, lower, in other words, lower in height, I would prefer that we adjourn this meeting to another date, and you come back with revised plans, and we can vote on something that we know exactly what we're voting on.
Well, Mr. Chair, I wouldn't make any objection to Mr. Korb's comment. I mean, if you want, what are you looking for? 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
No, like
Yeah, you just want to, you basically want to
Agreement.
step in the other room for 5 minutes, have a chat, and come back. You come back at, 9:31.
I don't think that's an unreasonable request, Mr.
Yeah.
Chair. I would support giving them a little time to huddle on this.
Right.
I agree.
Why don't we
Let's
just
see
say
where we are.
15 minutes? Or longer if the petitioner
No, no,
feels.
no.
No, he said he needed 5.
Thank you.
I need the cell phone number of our geotechnical.
Yeah, right.
um,
All right.
All right,
so-
we'll
Mr.
recess
Chair,
this.
I'm sorry, please go ahead.
No. I'm just going to recess the meeting for a period of 10 minutes.
Perfect.
So what, I don't have a watch on it. What time is it right
9:37.
now?
It's 9:27 now, it'll be 9:37.
So 9:37, we'll reconvene the meeting.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Jim, this is Brendan Sullivan. In the interlude, could you, I don't know if you have your book in front of you, look at section 11.207.5.2.1. I don't know if you got that.
Hold on, I'll never remember that.
11.21.
Hold on, I'm going there. Yep, 11.207.
11.207.5.2.1. And this is a document
Hold on.
this is a document that I was told not to refer to, and it has no relevance.
Unless well, let me go online and find it. Yeah.
I think we need to extend
It would be section B.
Yeah, I'm looking at what, you said 1107, correct?
11.207.5.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I heard you.
0.2.1. B.
Yep. Yeah.
All right, in 50 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
We'll be back at what was the time we said?
9:37.
9:37, we'll reconvene. Thank you.
Mr. Sullivan, you hear me?
Yes.
We're,
I
we're,
have
we're ready
the,
for you are, so.
are you ready to go?
I was going to give another minute, but we can go. The chair will now reconvene the meeting of the Board of Appeals. Is the petitioner available? And
We're available, Mr. Chairman.
okay, you requested the
Thank you.
continuance. Where are you with regard to the height of the building?
Thank you for allowing us to do that. So we would like to explore other options. We have some questions and we'd like to get some feedback if possible so that we're not chasing our tail and you're not, so we're all somewhat on the same page, if that's possible. So we'd like to get some feedback on things. And as a result of the feedback, we'd like to request a continuance at the end of this.
Well, perfectly understandable, and we have no problem with that. Question is, when do you want to postpone the meeting to? When are we going to reconvene? How much time do you need?
Well, maybe we could ask for some feedback first, and then based on that, we could adjust the amount of time. Would that be okay?
Feedback would be in the nature of the vote on the motion that's on the table. Well, we don't know what motion's on the table. Is it? We still have the height issue with the reference to affordable housing overlay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
If Mr. Corp could just ask the questions, maybe we could determine whether we can answer them or not.
I'm sorry? One more time, Linda?
It appears he has a few questions before we vote. And
Sure.
perhaps just listening to his questions, we can determine if we can answer them or not.
Yep. I'm open. That's fine. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Not you.
So,
Mr. Chair, go ahead, yes. What are your questions?
Okay, so my questions are first regarding height. So 9 stories is too much. We understand. We have a question about whether an 8-story building on Mass Ave that steps down. And now, by the way, I want to say we're not saying any of these are feasible at this. Okay. Would an 8-story building on Mass Ave that steps down to 6 stories potentially be acceptable? And let me just the others, would an all 7-story building be acceptable? Those are my first 2 questions.
Jim, since you were the one who started all this, what are your views, or what are your answers to the question?
I know this is, me personally, the all 7, and I can understand that why that would be a simpler development than the 8 and 6 could work. But I do recall all the conversations with the neighbors on Walden Street and how favorably they responded when the building's down to 6. So you got me between a rock and a hard place. So I could be certainly 8-6. I think it's a move on Mass Ave, and then it leaves it in what you've offered so far. I think in 10 Walden. Is that correct?
We're at 5 currently on Walden.
You're at 5 currently. So where everyone manipulates 1 story, you go down 1 there, you go up 1 there. You'd have to see it. I mean, you'd have to see it. It could be either one in my mind. I could see where the Walden folks would prefer the step down to them, though, based on the comments we heard before.
Yeah.
So if I get it right, Jim, what you're proposing or saying is acceptable: 8 stories on Mass Ave, 5 stories on. No, 6 stories, I'm sorry. 6 stories on Walden. Is that correct?
I could entertain that, as well as, again, depending on the kerfuffle with the concerns of the folks on Walden Street, I could 7 on both sides. Right? It just has a dramatically different presence in the neighborhood. Giving you any guidance there. I love you for both.
What does the petitioner propose? A 7-7, 8-6? What do you want?
We don't know. We don't know yet. We want to explore our options. We just want to. What we don't want to do is spend a lot of time, on the architect's time, working on something that might not be acceptable.
Let me go back to where I was a while ago. Then we have to continue the case tonight so you can explore your options. And we should decide to what time will we continue the case to.
Mr. Chair, it's Andrea Hickey speaking. I'd like to give a little feedback and perhaps give other colleagues the opportunity to give a little feedback. Mr. Korb, I could support an 8.6. I'm not wild about a 7-story overall, but my support of the 8.6 would be the building otherwise presented it. So with the basement for the bike storage, you know, I don't support a slab building losing that bike storage space. I think that's important. So I could fix with the building otherwise as presented so that the residents don't lose any amenities. I hope that's helpful. I think it's a good compromise.
Thank you.
Well, we can amend the motion to make it the 8-6 vote. And we'll see where we go when we take a vote.
But I think the petitioner still needs time to determine where that is feasible, I guess. Mr. Korb, I don't mean to speak for you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I don't think that it's prudent for the board to be taking votes when we have just decided that we are going to try to reconfigure something and come back with a redesign. I would respectfully request that any vote by the board just be withdrawn.
Be what? I'm sorry, any vote by the board?
Be withdrawn until the next hearing.
I think we should just vote on a continuance.
That's where I'm trying to go. I said we should continue the
just
case.
vote on the continuance, that's all.
Continue the case, let your side decide what you want to do, bring back what you want, and at that reconvened meeting, we'll take a vote. That's what I've been saying for the last 15 minutes.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we appreciate that. I think we were just trying to get some feedback, and we did get some from Mrs. Hickey, and I think we did get some from Mr. Monteverdi. So that's what we were looking for. We don't want to drag this on. We obviously know we wouldn't get approved tonight, and continuance we would appreciate a continuance. I think we didn't want to make a similar mistake thinking we had an idea of what the board might approve and then come back and do this again. So the feedback we received has been helpful, and we do need a continuance. We do want to try to modify the plans to conform to what the board would approve. So to your point, I think we got the feedback we requested, and a motion for and a continuance would be appreciated.
Okay, if we do continue it, we should have alternative plans or pages of plans showing if it's going to be, if what you're proposing is 8.6, what it's going to look like and the changes in the numbers. We need more information. But when would you like to reconvene the meeting to? And then we'll see if it works for the board. So how much time do you need?
So Jason Forney has the X.
Perhaps a month.
More than that.
6 weeks?
A month would take us roughly to the end of June. Right? You want more than that, less than that?
I don't want to repeat. I don't want a repeat of what happened last time, and I don't want to waste people's time. So I want to be mindful of everybody's time.
So we need to suggest something. So do we want to say at the end of 2 months?
Yeah, that's realistic.
Yeah.
Let me make life more difficult. 2 months puts us into the middle of the summer. I don't want to have this case, which is that important, decided in the middle of the summer, when first of all, it may be difficult to get the 5 of us all together, and also the many people who have expressed an interest in this case may not be available. If you want to go 2 months, and that's fine, I suggest we do a little bit better and we postpone until mid-September. That'll give you, you'll give more, you're not rushed, you can do revised plans, and we'll be at a time when everybody's back working or back in town, and we can have an informed discussion. How does that sound to you folks?
Yep. Yes, we would accept that.
Say it again?
Yes, we would do the September date.
Okay. We'll pick a date like we did tonight, where nothing else is going on. Cecilia, what are the dates that we have board
Well, our regular meetings for September are the 2nd and the 23rd. September 2nd and 23rd. So we could do
23rd.
9, 16,
The week
or
before the
30.
23rd would be the
16th.
16th. What if we continue this? And I got to ask the board members, are you available for a meeting on September 16th?
This is Brendan Sullivan. CC, is that a scheduled hearing date?
No.
It is not. It's a
No.
special date.
It's not a scheduled date, no.
Okay, so it'd be a special date for this.
Correct,
Yeah,
just
that's
like
fine.
this one.
That's good.
Yeah.
You're available on the 16th?
Yeah.
Jim? Jim?
Jim Monteverdi, that works for me.
Okay. Andrea?
Yes, I'm available on that date, but I would like to ask a question
No,
before we
fine.
vote on the
Okay.
continuance. Thank you.
You'll have a chance. Laura?
I'm probably going to be overseas, so as long as it's a remote, as long as I can remote in, and you're not planning, there wouldn't be any requirement that I be in person, then I can probably.
Okay, but if you find out that when you're overseas, that all of a sudden you can't remote in, you'll not be attending the meeting. There'll only be 4 of us, which is from our perspective, but it may not be fine from the perspective of the petitioner.
Mr. Chairman, I just found out it's Yom Kippur, so.
We could do the week before.
I think we need to look at another date.
I'm just wondering if it can't be like June 24th, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks. Is that too tight?
Sure. We can do that, right? I mean, it's
That's
really
gonna-
Jason. Can you get it done?
I think so.
June 24th doesn't work because we have a regular meeting that night. And I don't want to have this case on the regular meeting when we have 10 other cases standing around. So no.
Okay, let's go for September.
Let's go back to September.
We could do September 9th. Laura, is that better for you?
And Andrea, I want to give you your opportunity to ask your questions, but I think we should get this out of the way first.
It doesn't really matter whichever day. Either one will be the same.
And I'm fine with either date in September.
What's the date in September?
16th.
9th.
9th?
No, we said the 16th.
No, the 16th is Yom Kippur.
I should be available in December, so that's not a problem for me.
Yeah.
Brendan?
Yeah. CC, what was that number again?
I guess the 9th.
The 9th. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. September 9.
Okay, I won't make the motion yet because I want Andrea to be able to ask some further questions. But when we come back, she finishes her questions, and you finish your answers, I will make a motion to continue this case until 7 p.m. on September 9th. September 9th being like tonight, where there will be no other cases on the agenda. Okay, Andrea?
All right, so I just have a procedural question relative to council's comment. Is there a procedure by which we would rescind our vote against the original proposal just to keep the case alive such that the continuance is valid? Remember, we did vote the original proposal and it did not pass. And you were sort of doing an amendment to that vote. I'm thinking we need to rescind.
No. I'm sorry, I think you misunderstood, Andrea. The motion I made was the vote, was the thing we would be voting on. I wanted to get the motion on the table, but no vote was taken.
So it was a sense. It was a sense of the board. Is that?
It was a sense of the board.
Okay. All right.
So I don't think we got a problem there.
Okay.
Understood. Thank you for clarifying.
No, thank you for the question. Okay. Is there anything else? Andrea?
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay. And I assume other members of the board are set?
Yep.
All set.
Okay. The chair moves that we make the following motion, that this case be continued again as a case heard until 6 p.m. on September 9th, subject to the following conditions. First, that a waiver of time for decision be signed, and that's already been signed for this one tonight, so we don't need to do it again. Second, that a new posting sign reflecting the new date, September 9, and the new time, well, the time, 6 p.m., and that be maintained for the 14 days prior to that date required by our ordinance. And lastly, to the extent, and I guess there will be, there are modified, revised plans, specs, photographs, whatever, they must be in our file no later than 5 p.m., or the building department's file, no later than 5 p.m. on the Monday before September 9. Brendan, how do you vote?
Yes to the, Brendan Sullivan, yes to the continuance.
Jim?
Jim Monteverdi, yes to the continuance.
Andrea?
Andrea Hickey, yes to the continuance.
Laura?
Laura, yes to the continuance.
Chair votes yes as well. Before I actually say the vote has been taken, I just want to confirm the petitioners all set with the September 9th?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, the motion carries. This case will be continued until September 9th.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Class dismissed.
Class.
All right. Thank you all.
Thanks,
Good
Jim.
night.
Good night.
I don't know how many people in the audience are still there, but
Thousands.
61 people still? Okay. Well, for the benefit of those, if they're still on. No, I just... You just cut them off? I think I did. Okay, fine. I just want to make sure you understood what we're doing. Because a lot of the people are not sophisticated. I think I have. It's okay. Forget about it. I would like to see this building go down another story. I would like to see this building go down another story.
Three.
It better be.